Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Gran Turismo Series Racing League EU Division 1 Season 40. I'm your host, Paul TX14 Walsh, also known as Britain a Spit, depending on what media you follow me on, and this week marks the start of round number 2 in the 3-round series. Now, last time out, we were in Italy at Autodrome Lago Maggiore West variant in the Mazda Roadster touring cars for what was some fast, frantic, but quite fiery and door-to-door action all the way through. Some say, in certain circumstances, it looked a little bit more like a demolition derby or something like touring car rather than standard racing, but all the same, our drivers made it through, and in the end, after a very, very fiery set of races, everybody's now called off and set themselves up for what is a very different combination. Now, with this being a multiplier of 10 in terms of the season number, it's season 40. We have the recall of the best of past seasons throughout the entirety of the GTSRL history, and we are recalling back tonight a combination which some of you will remember from season 35, and that is the combination of Circuit de la Sarthe, or you know it as Le Mans, with all the chicanes we're running the latest format of the circuit that's been in place since 2007, and the cars we're running around here are the legendary Group Cs, perhaps the defining era of prototype motorsport and 24-hour endurance racing. The Group C cars, they're here again once again for some fantastic racing action on hand. And as we say hello to those of you in chat, including Zeronic and HBoss GT, and we hope you're all doing well. For those of you tuning in, well, it's been the first day of the week, it is Monday, so we've all had to go back to work, and well, depending on where you live, it might be boiling hot, or it might be kind of lovely, and some of you may have had a good start to your week, or you've had a bad start to your week. Regardless, I hope you're doing well, and if you haven't had a great start to your week, hopefully tonight's show can bring you a little bit of cheer as you tune in to root on your favourite racers as always. Now, what I should tell you is that going into tonight's round, we do have a number of grid penalties to be applied to some drivers. We've also had a driver retire from the series, unfortunately due to personal circumstances. We'll come on to that shortly. But we are expecting to have some very, very fast and furious racing here tonight. And it's going to be a little bit more of a strategic one here at Le Mans compared to what we saw last time out, given the fact the circuit length is considerably longer. We've got less laps available, but also there is the big question of slipstream and how important it can be in order to get the best possible run into the second half of the circuit, where the slipstream starts to fade away a little bit and it becomes more technical. Now, as we take a look in with race control at the moment, we haven't had anything come through in terms of any other last-minute adjustments other than the grid penalties and also the retirement of one driver from the series. So without further ado, let's hop down to the circuit and start to introduce our drivers once again and tell you the story so far after round number 1. Now, round number 1 was very tight throughout, and as a result, we haven't had a driver really establish themselves as the breakaway in terms of the championship so far. Although we do have one driver with a few more points than everybody else, and that is Yaya. You're looking at him right now, the British driver making his way out of the pit lane and out onto the circuit. Now, Yaya, out of everybody, was to have the strongest round number 1 last time out, picking up 45.5 points for what was a second place in both races 1 and 2, and then a second place in race number 3 as well. So really consistent was Yaya, deciding to go for the consistency above everything else, and always find himself right up the front. But of course, with it being so tight at Autodrome Lago Maggiore, it was a case that at the Italian circuit, Yaya looked to pick up the best possible points rather than overdo it and get himself involved in any major instance or drama. And he has, as a result of that, got himself a 7.5 point lead over second place man at the moment, the Croatian of Crowhawk, who we see has had a little bit of a disaster at the opening Ford chicane there. But the Croatian at the moment sat on 38 points, and indeed in a very tight call for second place at the moment. And last time out, we saw that he did have a good overall run in round number 1, albeit not in race number 1 in particular, what with that 9th place finish, but in race number 2, returning to the very front of the field with a second place, with a win, I should say, not a second place finish, a win in race number 2, and then in race number 3 in the bonus points race picking up a 3rd place. So if it weren't for his result in race number 1, well, it could be argued that Crowhawk would be right up there contesting Yaya right now, and that's the difference between the two of them. And it's a similar story in a way for our 3rd place man, Spalgazan, who is currently in P3 on 37 points, and I believe Spalgazan, if he hasn't already arrived at the pit lane, no, he hasn't quite arrived just yet, he will be joining us in due course, and we'll come on to our 3rd place man when he does arrive down in the paddock. Now, it's at this point that we need to introduce Zenq-Meister, who is our 4th place man in the Drivers' Championship on 36.5 points. So that's how tight it is for P2 right now. 1.5 points separate Zenq in P4 from second place man Crowhawk. However, ZQ last time out had a very interesting set of races, and the fact that in race number 1 ended up picking up a 6th place finish, in race number 2 picked up a 4th place finish, and in race number 3 was to pick up another 4th place finish, and having some consistent results in the end, but it started off on a difficult note. And ZQ, due to being involved in a number of incidents in round number 1, and particularly one incident in particular, has received a 3-place grid penalty, which will be applied to his qualifying position over the course of the qualifying session tonight. So wherever ZQ qualifies in the qualifying session, expect him to be deducted by 3 places and drop a little bit further down the order. And that's where we were talking about earlier. Things got a bit fiery and bumpy amongst drivers, and ZQ was one of those right in the thick of it. However, we do wish him all the best, and unfortunately this is a combination which ZQ is not wanting to remember as much as perhaps he did in the past. And some of you may be thinking right now, ZQ sounds familiar. ZQ Group C, Circuit de la Sarthe. Well, in season 35, EU Division 2, if I remember correctly, round number 3, in race number 3, some of you may remember that it all came down to the final corner, and ZQ was almost there for picking up the race win, and that would have been a phenomenal overturn of results, only to throw it away on the final corner and send the car spinning out onto the gravel. So ZQ tonight will be looking to banish the thought of season 35 from his mind and looking to get the best possible result tonight and make sure not to make the same mistake twice. Can he do so? I'm sure he can do it, but we'll wait and find out. That's a little bit of trivia for you there, and perhaps why ZQ is going to want this one a little bit more than everybody else, because it'll be a redemption story for him. He'll want to buy it back at the circuit. Now, meanwhile, in P5 in the standings is Slim Users, the Finnish driver who we refer to as Slim from this point onwards, making his way down towards the Mulsanne corner right now alongside Robert Dimikiro. And we can see that Slim on 30.5 points, 6 off a P4 right now. And Slim having a very odd night last time out in Autodrome Largo Maggiore, picking up the win in race number 1, picking up a 3rd place in race number 2, and then it all went horrifically wrong because of an incident, if I remember correctly, on lap number 1 at Big Banky Boy, where he ended up dropping well down the order. And in the end, as a result of that, ended up finished in 11th place. It all went from great to fantastic to disastrous for Slim, and he'll be looking to bounce back immediately tonight, and he needs to, because he's only a point clear of Luco 33, the Welshman, who is currently making his way down towards the circuit, we believe, but he's not currently at the circuit side, and we do have our start checks getting underway within the next 7 minutes. But Luco on 29.5 points, we'll come on to him a little bit later, and he's only a point ahead of fellow Welshman Vox Bacchus, who's on 28.5 points. That's how close it really is right now in terms of the championship. And then in 8th place in the Drivers' Championship right now, the EU Division 1, is this man right here, Phil the Vibes, the British driver, making his way down towards Indianapolis right now, down the Toyota straight here. And as he makes his way charging along, I can tell you that last time out he had a strong start, but it did fall off the cliff a little bit as he went deeper and deeper into the race evening round number 1. And with a 3rd place in race number 1, and then what was a 7th place in race number 2, and then a disastrous 10th place in race number 3. It just went from good to bad to disastrous, and he'll be looking to bounce back, will Mr. Johnny Powell, as we know him as Feel the Vibes here, as he makes his way down towards Arnage right now. In P9, meanwhile, we have the Estonian of Pete Giola, and a fan favourite, of course, as we see he makes his way into Tetra Rouge once again. And we can see here that Peachy making his way through the very difficult right-hand corner and coming out of the corner right now. Now, Peachy, last time out, had a difficult round number 1, picking up what was a 12th place in race number 1, and then it was in the end, my apologies, I thought I was going to sneeze there due to hay fever. What was then a P9 in race number 2, but he started to find a little bit more form in race number 3, picking up a P5. But I think it was the close contact nature of the Mazda Touring cars which just caught Peachy out a little bit, plus the fact it wasn't really a car he was perhaps best suited to. We saw he was down in qualifying and feeling as though it was going to be an uphill battle, but in the end he did prevail to an extent, and he'll be looking to do all the best tonight. And he'll need to, because he's only a point ahead of Basler, the German driver who's returned as of this season, last featured in season 33 of course, and we can see Basler making his way through the Tetra Rouge chicane right now before heading into Tetra Rouge itself, and last time out picking up those 23 points, putting him in P10 in the Drivers' Championship, what was a P8 in race number 1, a P11 in race number 2, and then a bounce back to another P7 in race number 3. A strong end to his evening, and it's given him a 5-point advantage over the Dutchman of Golden Dagen right now, who is making his way out of the final corner onto another flying lap in this practice session. The 18 points man as he currently stands in that Nissan R92 CP, and we can see as it is the current standing, picking up the last place in race number 1 last time out, bouncing up to what was a P8 in race number 2, and then it was a very difficult race number 3, but he was able to pick up what was a P9 in the end, and he'll be looking and hoping that this is a more favourable combination for him. We then come down to Mamba Strike. So it should be pointed out at this point that Mamba is no longer racing in this series due to personal circumstances. He's had to retire from Season 40 prematurely, which is very unfortunate, of course. But Mamba currently in P12 on 17 points, and because he'll be frozen on those points, I suspect he will be at the bottom of our drivers' standings come the end of this racing season. But we'll wait and see. Of course, you never know what could happen. Then we've got the Australia Chronic Opal, currently down in P13. Had a very difficult night at the races in round number 1, and really Chronic was the one who received all the incidents. He was the victim of all the incidents, all the major ones, where he ended up finishing in P11 in race number 1, in last place in race number 2, and then what was in P13 in race number 3. And literally every time a major incident occurred, Chronic was the one on the receiving end of it, and that's why he ended up so far down the order. And even sometimes it was a case of mistakes also crept in later on in the race evening, and he just could not find a rhythm. And then we come down to our last place man, the Dutchman of K2 Zahn, who had the worst of everybody's evenings last time out in round number 1, picking up a last place in race number 1, a 13th place in race number 2, and then another last place in race number 3. An unfavourable combination, plus also the fact that K2 was involved in a significant number of incidents. And I should point out, ladies and gentlemen, that when I say a significant number of incidents here, you're probably thinking right now, okay, perhaps he had 1 or 2, perhaps he's got a small grid place penalty. Actually, it's not a small grid place penalty, it's a 24 grid place penalty for K2 Zahn for being involved in such a number of incidents, and as a result of that, he will definitely be starting at the back in qualifying. So, well, sorry, not at the back in qualifying, at the back in race number 1. No matter what he does in qualifying, it will be irrelevant. He will be starting at the back in race number 1. So that is the summary of our field with regards to the points, and we are going to hop back up to some of our drivers and just talk you through with regards to as they make their way around right now and introduce some of the drivers. And we will check on board with your hood cam very shortly, K2. My sincere apologies. One sec. Oh, pit exit lines, I see. So it was also the pit exit lines that gave you a significant number of penalties. As we see, we have got 2 very annoying little bots in our stream chat as well. And we say hello to Ukanedo. And we've also got Peachiola in the chat. Well, thank you for clarifying there, K2. As we see, you pick up a little bit of a penalty there, and well, we hope that you have the best of luck tonight and can fight your way up the order. That is not the that is a bit of a disaster, but still, all the same, we do hope you can do the best you possibly can. Now, in terms of other drivers who've just arrived, and let's introduce them, of course, it's about time we did introduce them. The drivers who we did not see straight off the bat include, and I believe they're in the pit lane right now, well, we've got Careless One here. But Careless One is not in EU Division 1. In fact, we've got a number of drivers here who are not in EU Division 1 who are parked up currently. So I'm not sure what exactly is going on here. I think we've got a number of drivers hopping into this lobby just to get in some last minute practice. But I assume they're going to be asked to leave because I'm not getting any confirmation at race control as to why we've got some additional drivers in here. But what I can tell you right now is going out onto circuit. I was going to say it's Vox Bacchus. Yeah, he's making his way out to circuit right now. Here's Vox Bacchus, the Welsh driver here, making his way out of the pit in the Mazda 787B. Now, Bacchus, last time out, having a reasonable string of results, albeit it wasn't perfect, let's put it that way. Well, the fact he picked up a 9th place in race number 1, a 5th place in race number 2, and then what was a middling result in the end of a P6 in race number 3. And Bacchus will be looking to try and do a little bit better tonight and perhaps get a point or 2 over his fellow countryman, Luke 33, who was still waiting to arrive down in the paddock. Now, we will come to the constructors very shortly, but this is a good point to actually back out very briefly and talk a little bit about the cars. You can see here on terms of our chart on the right hand side that because it's Group C and we do not have a mandated car, we have a mandated car class, we have the option of 5 cars available to our drivers. We have the Jaguar XJR12, we've also got the Porsche 962C, we've got the Mazda 787B, we've got the Nissan R92CP, and we've got the Sauber Mercedes C9. And what you can see is that the majority of drivers have gone in that chart there for the Mazda 962C, but we've got a couple who've gone for the Mazda 787B and a couple who are going to go for that Nissan R92 CP. Now you're probably wondering at this point, okay, well, what's the difference between the cars and why have we got a lot of Porsches and then we've got one screaming rotary boy in the form of Vox Bacchus' Mazda 787B, and then we're going to have that Nissan R92 CP that we saw a little bit further down in terms of the order. And we'll pull out the driver who in particular is running that car shortly. Well, the Porsche 962C within the Group C category is the all-rounder. Now remember, our sessions over the course of this season, or particularly in this one, in round number 2 is that balance of performance is on, as defined by Polyphony Digital as part of the GT Sport package, but tuning is permitted. So that means we have the base balance of performance in terms of power and weight settings, but our drivers can manipulate the tune as much as they want with regards to the suspension, the brake balance, the gearbox, everything. So that means we have a bit of an interesting conundrum, because the Porsche 962C is the all-rounder, and here's an example of one as driven by Phil the Vibes. The 962C is technically the car that you want for the most balanced performance of any car within the Group C category. It's got handling, it's got straight line speed, it's got acceleration, and it's quite comfortable in its tyres. However, and this is the big however moment, if you look at the Mazda 787B as driven by our Welshman here, Vox Bacchus, as he decides to implant it into the wall at Indianapolis, what you'll note is that the 787B has an innate straight line speed advantage as per its standard balance of performance. Now, with tuning, that can be negated or improved, but the Mazda 787B has weaker handling by comparison with the Porsche 962C. It doesn't quite have the turning by default with the stock tune, so as a result of that, Bacchus will most likely have worked on trying to improve the turning in capability to the handling capabilities of the 787B, whilst also maximising that ferocious rotary engine's pull on the straight. Then again, we also do have, as mentioned earlier, we do have the Nissan R92 CP. Now, this is, according to the stock tunes and the base balance performance, this is the fastest car down the straights. If you're looking for the car which is going to outrun everybody, it is this one. However, it has got the weakest handling and also the weakest tyre wear model out of the 5 cars available to our drivers. So this car will get through its tyres faster than the others. But that's the default tune, of course, with balance and performance applied. So with a bit more tuning, as we see there, Crowhawk having an absolute mare of running out of, not Tetra, out of Mulsanne corner. Well, you can see there he had to really get the car stabilised, as we note that Luco, who's now come out onto the circuit, is running in the Mazda 7. Well, he's not running out in the Mazda, actually. That was an incorrect statement. He's running in the Sauber Mercedes C9. So this is a gamble from the Welshman. Now, this is a very interesting pick, because the Sauber Mercedes C9 is by default the handling car. It's the most comfortable in its tyres, and it's very strong through the handling zone. So expect this car to really come to life over the course of the second half of the lap from Indianapolis onwards, where we've got more handling, we've got less acceleration zones, but it will be potentially quite vulnerable down the Mulsanne straight in particular, as we're waiting for everybody to ready up for our opening start check. So we will take a little roll call with regards to the cars that our drivers have picked, particularly in qualifying. We'll do the roll call there, because some of our drivers might be doing their final testing before they get underway, of course. But that is the big conundrum tonight with regards to car choice. And will we see anybody decide to make a huge gamble by opting not to run the Porsche but running something different? Because remember, back in season 35, the Porsche was definitely the meta car and the most effective tactic available car for all of our drivers in EU Division 1, and it was pretty much run by everybody. But we are seeing some outliers tonight, and perhaps our outliers have got something under their sleeve which our Porsche drivers do not know about. And I think Luco in particular, and that's Mercedes C9, if he's able to nail it here, he could be a very potent force, because he should be able to run away from other drivers through the handling zones. But of course, the tune is such an important part. And in terms of our races tonight, we have 3 races, of course, as always. It will be races 1 and 2 are 3 laps long, and then race number 3, the feature length race, where we have the mandatory pit stop, will be 6 laps long. And of course, we have tyre wear of times 4 and a fuel consumption of times 2. So none of our drivers will have to worry about fuel, but tyres could be a concern. And remember, we have got an incredibly long pit stop time here at Circuit de la Sarthe. So if they do come into the pit and decide to put on a fresh pair of tyres, that already compounds the pit stop time, and strategy is going to be so critical in race number 3. As we are really now waiting for the countdown here, we're getting our first start check underway, and whilst we're getting our start checks underway, we're going to talk a little bit about the Constructors' Championship. But also, thank you for clarifying there, Peachy. Well, at the same time, whilst you're not hoping for too much, I'm sure you'll be able to pull something off. You'll bounce back this week. As we come down to our first start check, then we can see that we have got a couple of R92s, and we've also got that Sauber and the Mazda. We've got the long distance camera here. And as the lights go out and away they go, you can see there that Yaya bogging down on the start massively, and all of our drivers have to take evasive action around Yaya. And as they all charge up towards turn number 2 here, as they cut towards the Dunlop chicane, you can see Luco getting a huge run, but Yaya bouncing back immediately. And we can see that Luco just missing his braking point complete. And this is the thing that a lot of our drivers will not be used to necessarily through their practice sessions. They'll have done a lot of lap practice, but they won't necessarily have done as much with regards to standing start practice. So you'll see that a lot of drivers will be using this to get a feel for what it's like on that standing start with the cold tyres in the run down towards turn number 2, and that very long run which ends up with a very heavy braking zone on the cold tyres and cold braking discs, of course, as everybody now makes their way onto the Moleshead Straight. Now, as we can see here, with everybody tucking into the slipstream immediately, and I should clarify for you folks that the slipstream is set to weak here, so as a result we will have a slipstream zone, a tow zone, at 2.25 seconds off the car in front. You can see already that Yaya is being closed up rather rapidly by Slim Jesus, who's got Basler all over the back of him as well. And all of our Porsche 962 drivers here, the 4 of them at the front, and then we see Golden Dagon get it very wrong going into the braking zone for the first Moleshead chicane. We've got Bacchus meanwhile in the Mazda 787B, and this is where the Mazda, if it's been tuned correctly, should really fly compared to the Porsches, and it will just absolutely build up speed here. To give you an idea, you can see already up to 200 miles an hour. Then it's going to be 210 miles an hour before coming into that braking zone. 215. He's going to be up at approximately 219 miles an hour before going into that braking zone, and that is phenomenal. But of course, the downside of that car is the fact that it doesn't quite have the handling that the Porsche does, as we see Slim Yeezers has got something horrifically wrong, and that is where Bacchus is going to have to capitalise. He'll need to use the weak slipstream coming out of these corners, plus that straight line speed to get him really close to the guys in front. And you can see once again how he's now really building that pace down into the braking zone for the Moleshead corner. You look a little bit further back, meanwhile, you can see that you've got Golden Dagon in the R92 CP. And watch how this, by comparison with the Mazda, will build up speed coming out of the Moleshead corner in the run down towards Indianapolis. If you thought the Mazda was fast, this is going to be even faster. We ride on board, and you'll see up into 4th gear already. Most of these cars, I believe, only have 5 gears. Now going into the overdrive gear, he's, of course, in the slipstream of multiple cars, up to 210 before the second kick. 215, 220, 225, 230 miles an hour down into the braking zone for Indianapolis, and he's got to nail that every time. And look at the speed carry into the corner. It is phenomenal in that R92 CP, and I think Dagon in particular is going to be so dangerous on these straights. That car is going to literally bolt like a flipping horse, and it is going to charge after the Porsches and all the other cars, but particularly the Porsches will be vulnerable to it. As we see behind him, by comparison, we do have the likes of Chronic Opel, the Australian here, who's brought the Mazda 787 once again here. So Chronic decided to bring the Mazda, his old favourite, back. Oh, I believe that's the Mazda. No, yeah, that is the Mazda, as we see Dagon get it very wrong and going onto the gravel there. And that's the one thing about the R92 CP, is it's not a car that enjoys corners compared to the others. And through the Porsche curves, those medium speed sweepers, that's where it's going to struggle the most compared to the other cars. It takes a long time to get that nose round, and it loses apex speed. But as we can see, Yaya and Feel the Vibes coming to the end of this stuck jet race right now. Of course, all of our drivers making it off the line safely. So Yaya picking up the win in the stuck jet race just ahead of Feel the Vibes as they both cross the line. And then Slim Users rounded off the theoretical podium there, as then we've got Bacchus making his way across, albeit Chronic Opel behind him and jumping ahead of him because of the penalty. Crowhawk and ZQ, they're both crossing the line, and then we're going to have a Luco coming home in P8 and getting a little bit of a feel in there for the Sauber Mercedes. And then we're going to have Dagon, who is literally creeping that car home right now. As you can see, he's rejoined the circuit. K2 up to P9, and then Peach Yola spinning it out literally before the finish line there. And it's that curb on the exit. You've got to be so gentle getting on the power, as all of our drivers complete Stuck Jet Race number 1, our 11 drivers here. And we say congratulations to them all, but in particular to our winner, Yaya. But with the first Stuck Jet race complete, we now come on to talking a little bit about the Constructors' Championship. And we are still expecting some more drivers to arrive. Now in the Constructors, it's extremely close once again, in the fact that team number 3 are currently leading in the Constructors, and that is the combination of Spalgazen and Vox Bacchus. Bacchus is currently here, of course, and he'll be bringing out the Mazda 787B tonight, and we are waiting to see when Spalgazen will arrive. The Welshman and the Brit on 65.5 points, only 4.5 ahead of team number 2 on 61, and that is the combination of the Croatian of Crowhawk, who of course is bringing the Porsche 962C, and Basler alongside him, the German, also bringing the Porsche 962C. Then they are only half a point ahead of team number 1, and that is the combination of Peachy Erler, who we saw earlier on running out in the 962C, and here he is again, the Estonian, and he is joined by, of course, Zenku Meister, who is also running out in that 962C. So a lot of the top teams here opting for that 962C combination, albeit we do have, well, it is Vox Bacchus up there running with the Mazda. Then you've only got 2.5 points down to team number 4 on 58 points, and that is the combination of Feel the Vibes here in the 962C tonight, and his teammate, of course, of Slim. And Slim, I believe, have been in the 962C as well, as we're about to get underway with our second stuck check of the evening. And everything is proceeding as planned right now. So we'll pan down to the grid very shortly. As we say hello to Robert Dimicuro in the chat as well. Hope you're doing well, Rob, and indeed to all those you tuning in. We can see there's a good number of you watching right now. If I haven't acknowledged you already, I hope you're having a good time, and don't be afraid to say hi in the chat. And once again, with the distant panning shot here of the grid. It's lights out and away we go once again, and watch how the Porsches will have the sling on the straight here after a small amount of time. As we see there, it looks like Luco trying to take the rallycross line to go around everyone, but getting it very wrong. And look at Jesus and K2 in particular really getting close to the back of Bacchus, but Bacchus having enough there in that Mazda to pull off the line and hold on to the lead. So it looks as though we have very similar starts to the majority of the cars here, but a lot of carnage behind the drivers as they go up into the Dunlop chicane and through then down towards the Tetra Rouge chicane, and you can see Zenku getting tapped on the back by Yaya there. As everybody now settling down in this second stuck check race here, and I think just trying to get themselves a little bit more warmed up. Although I say that Krynik Oval getting knocked wide with Zenku on the inside there, but it looks as though Krynik turned into Zenku, and as they all make their way down the Mulsanne Straight once again here, we can see that again it's a test of slipstream. As we do note, we have got a couple of cars just getting a little bit hectic off the racing line there, and in particular we can see Krynik Oval building up the speed right now and gradually gaining as K2 has now taken the lead in the stuck check race number 2. Coming into that braking zone then for the first of the chicanes, everybody coming in on cold tyres here, but the tyres should be relatively warm when they leave this first chicane. Dagan going very wide, they're just getting on the tower too early, and that is the thing he seems to be struggling with in that 92, in the fact that when he's able to get the foot down and get it lined up, he flies, but it's getting the nose pointed out of the corner that he's struggling with. As we see, Feel the Vibes right now in P6 in this run, making his way down towards the second of the Mulsanne chicanes here, and just doing his best to catch up to the leaders as Luco has jumped ahead, and that's Sauber not looking too bad down the straights. In fact, we're going to do a quick check down the Indianapolis run as he came side by side with Basler there, albeit we was going to say that Luca, and he's put it into the wall, getting on the power too soon. That car not very stable at all, so we focus back on our leaders right now as they continue to charge all the way down towards the Mulsanne corner, and you can see behind how everybody's getting very shifty inside by side into the braking zone here, of course, and we are going to expect to see a lot of this as Crowhawk looks to move on the inside of Krynik Oval, and I think there was a huge hit there on the back of Krynik Oval by Crowhawk, and as a result of that, everybody coming out the corner. Of course, it won't mean anything right now as Crowhawk is all over the road there, and I think a lot of drivers going for very unsettled tunes, which will give them a lot of speed through the corners. It'll give them the maximum possible rotation, but if they can get the car around the corner, that's another question entirely. As we see, we've got 3 wide down into Indianapolis right now, although K2 has jumped ahead, as it looks though Zenku and Yaya came to blows, and Yaya in fact getting very, very sketchy on the brakes and keep under control, although Feel the Vibe, well, Slim Jesus clipping the back of Yaya there as he tried to get on the power, and Vibes now ahead of the pair of them, but I think it's turning into more of a demolition derby than anything else right now as they all make their way out of Arnage and in the run down towards the Porsche curves. As we see K2 actually having a very comfortable race, albeit this isn't for points. I think he'd be wishing right now this was for points because he's having one of his stronger moments in season 40 so far. I think he's just enjoying the rhythm as we look a bit further back, and we can see Pete Scheller up into P6 right now, and he's hunting down Basler as they go into the Porsche curves, but he's not able to find his way up the inside as Basler goes a little little bit further into the corner by comparison. Peachy carrying more momentum, although I think K2 has made a major mistake and as a result has dropped down the order. So it's Vibes and ZenQ now leading the pack. As we look further back, and we can see that K2 falling all the way down the order as drivers are going wide left, right and centre out that final part of the Porsche curves, and they will be due to penalties. They will be due penalties, I should say, if they do that in the proper race. But as we can see, coming out of the final corner once again is going to be Feel the Vibes, who just about holds on to pick up the win ahead of ZenQ. Slim in P3, it'll be Basler in P4, and then it's going to be Crowhawk rounding off our top 5, albeit then Peachiola, then Vox Bacchus, Chronic Opal, Yaya, Dagan, and then, well, it's Luco who pips Dagan in the end because of the penalty burning, and then it's going to be K2 who brings our order home there. And with us having one more driver in the mix, we are expecting Spalgazan to still come down to the circuit before we get underway, or at least that's my understanding. But all 12 of our drivers making it home safe and sound in the end. Congratulations to them, and to Feel the Vibes for winning the second stock check. But with that, with our second stock check race complete, and Spalgazan will not be racing tonight, I've just been informed. So as a result, we are only going to have 12 drivers. So as a result, we will only have the 12 drivers, and now we're just getting ready for qualifying. We will, of course, have a time of day change, and that will signal the start. A couple of our drivers just taking a very quick comfort break before getting underway. So qualifying should be with you within the next 2 minutes or so. And in the constructors, to continue from where we left off, so Slim Yeezus, we were about to say what car he's running as part of team number 4. He's running the Porsche 962C, and he is the second driver in team number 4's combination alongside Feel the Vibes, also running the 962C on 58 points. And then you've got an 8-point gap down to Team 5, who are P5 with 50 points, and that is the combination of the Dutchman of K2 in the 962C, and we've also got the Yaya, our Drivers' Championship leader currently in the Porsche 962C there, and then we have got in P6 team number 6 on 47.5 points, and that is Golden Dagan, who is currently sat in the pit lane, and of course he is bringing that legendary Nissan R92 CP, the very strong car in a straight line, and his teammate Luco33, the Welshman in the Sauber Mercedes C9. I'd love to see what he's been able to get the top speed of that car in the run to Indianapolis up to. If he's got it into the region of about 220 miles an hour, then do not count Luco out, because this car could be a dark horse. And then last but not least in the championship of right now, the constructors, is team number 7, the combination of the Australian of Chronic Opal, who's in the Mazda 787B, and of course Mamba Strike, who will not be racing anymore in season 40. So Chronic Opal has got it all to do to try and elevate team 7 off the bottom step of the constructors championship right now. But that's the story in terms of our Drivers' Championship, our Constructors' Championship, the machines our drivers are bringing today. And I guess the big question now is, what can we expect in qualifying? Well, I think in qualifying, folks, we are looking... The rumour down in the paddock is that some drivers, thanks to the fact we have now removed all fuel from the car, but tyre wear is still a concern, we are looking potentially at 3:16s, if not 3:15s. That's 3-minute 15-second laps. That will be a phenomenally fast lap around here. And it is being set in the Porsche. That's what we're hearing as we say hello to Gomez 1988, and we hope you're doing well, Gomez. It's good to see you in here, of course. As always, you've just joined us in time for qualifying to about to get underway any moment soon. And that is the rumour I'm hearing down in the paddock, that pole is going to be a 3:15 or as close as possible to it, as everybody right now is also just getting themselves edged in just a tiny bit more, and I think really the favourites will be the 962C drivers here, but at the same time expect that the Mazda 787Bs are going to be strong, and do not forget the outliers of Luco in that Sauber Mercedes C9 and Dagan in the Nissan R92 CP. We do have the Meta once again from season 35 coming to the 4A, but it's not as though we don't have variety in EU Division 1. And there's going to be some very, very big questions asked of all of our drivers right now. And be sure to place your bets. Who's going to be on pole? I think, to be honest, given the fact that our drivers are not permitted to use the slipstream of other drivers in qualifying, that it's going to be the case of everybody trying to push as much as they possibly can around the circuit and try to catch up to someone coincidentally to get a little bit of a tow somewhere around the track. But then again, In a bit of clear air as well, that could be absolutely fine. Just have a nice clear air lap and absolutely nail the second half, because remember, the first half of the circuit is predominantly acceleration zones and extended straights, where top end is going to be critical. But after Indianapolis, which you can see that Golden Dagan is just coming down to Indianapolis right now, it's going to be the case that through the rest of the circuit, it's all about handling and, well, getting the best possible apex speeds for the Porsche curves, and the Ford chicanes is going to be critical. As we can see that slipstream strength has been reduced to real for qualifying, so a 0.75 second window, so our drivers will not be able to capitalise on the weak slipstream setting in qualifying, which of course is expected in the rule book, and I think that is the signal for all of us to get underway with qualifying. So it's going to be 12 minutes, our drivers will have 2 fast laps. Who's going to be on pole by the end of it? Let's find out. As we say hello to Flying Carl in the chat. It's good to see you in here, Carl. So everybody getting themselves set and getting themselves out on the circuit, and everyone will be piling out as quickly as possible. And good to have you in the chat here, Member Strike. Sorry to hear that you couldn't race as part of the season anymore, but it's good to see you spectating all the same. And, well, rooting for Vibes today. We hope that it's going to happen well. For Vibes, we hope that he's going to have a good round number 2. Of course, indeed, for all of our drivers, we can't play favourites, unlike, of course, you, the spectators, can. As we see that Luco right now making his way out ahead of everybody else out of the pit lane. He's got Yaya immediately behind him, but the Welshman will not mind that. He has a very bad run there, actually, through Tetrarouge, and as a result, Yaya immediately charging past. As we also say hello to Remon VM1. Hope you're doing well, and I believe Remon is the Dutch brother there of Jerry R driver, or is it K2? I'm getting forgetful in my old age already, but we know Remon, one of our younger drivers in the field, but still, he may be young, but he's very feisty and racing as always. But we can see that Luco and Yaya both making their way through the first of the Mulsanne chicanes right now. And the thing about this lap in particular, given the fact that the out lap is approximately somewhere in the region of 3.5 minutes to about 3 minutes 45 once you consider spacing to give yourself room compared to the other cars, it does mean that really our drivers can expect to get 2 flying laps. And also the tyre wear factor as well does mean that it's going to be one of those situations whereby after 2 laps around here, the tyres are going to start to have significant graining, and I think that's where they're going to lose out, particularly through the handling corners. As we see Crowhawk and Krynick here just exchanging positions in the run down towards the second of the Mulsanne chicanes here, and I think both drivers trying to give themselves priority out on circuit, but Crowhawk the one to jump ahead of the Australian there as they make their way now down towards the Mulsanne corner. And we can see behind the fin of Slim and Pichia, the Estonian behind him, just simply settling into the order and charging down towards the Mulsanne corner here, and everybody are really trying to get around as quickly as possible in order to give themselves those good 2 flying laps, give themselves best opportunity in this qualifying session, because qualifying is going to be quite critical in terms of where you factor into that initial slipstream train coming out of Tetrarouge, and you do not want to lose the slipstream of the leaders in the pack. As soon as the pack starts to break open, we see the pack split up. That's when we'll see our racing orders defined here, and you can see at the foreground of your camera shot there, Krynick Opel just jumping ahead of Vox Bacchus now, and behind Slim, and we've also got, by looks of things there, Luco getting into the mix and Peachy earlier as well. Everybody's still trying to find themselves some place out on circuit, and they're all trying to hurry around, not trying to trip over one another, but they've got to be so careful here as they make their way down towards our nudge, because if anybody trips over another driver, that can cost a huge amount of time, get a significant amount of dirt on the tyres, and completely disrupt a driver's flow. But meanwhile, at the head of the pack, you can see that Yaya now has started to give himself some breathing room out on circuit as he uses the full width upon entry then to the Porsche curves. A brave man there, Yaya, literally pushing it to the limits as he goes through the double left-hand section there in 4th gear on the rev limiter before doing a quick snap down shift to 3rd gear, and now coming up towards the end of the Porsche curves. And he is going to be our first drive round as K2's got himself some breathing room, as has Crowhawk, and now you can see behind, pardon me, this is where all our drivers are bunching up, but they'll be getting themselves ready to go, and we're going to jump on board with Yaya here for the opening flying lap of EU Division 1's qualifying session for round number 2. So coming out the final corner then, a very stable exit out of the final corner, now onto his flying lap. You're going to see immediately Yaya going up through the gears as quickly as possible, staying relatively wide into turn 1 for the heavy braking zone into turn 2, not going up into 5th gear here, braking at the first total board and coming down to 2nd gear gently before going through the Dunlop chicane, cutting more of the opening part of the chicane than the second part because of the track limits here, before charging down the hill towards the Tetrarouge chicane here, into the left-hander he's about to go, coming down to 3rd gear before throwing the car in there, using the downshift to unsettle the rear of the car before absolutely clattering the throttle out of the chicane. Now into Tetrarouge here, it was just going to be a little lift, a tiny little lift as you can see, before stamping the throttle back down and now charging all the way down the Mulsanne straight. And it's been a very strong opening sector already from the British driver here, as he's now got the long run down towards the first in the Mulsanne chicanes. Now we've seen a very high top speeds down here, and we're going to see in the Porsche 962C, he is starting to lose out a little bit in the top end speed here compared to some of the other cars, going up to 213 miles an hour before coming down on the brakes, and nice and late on the brakes and trailing it into the chicane. As you can see, downshifted to second at the last possible moment in order to get the rear of the car to lift, and as a result of that, throw it into the left-hand portion of the chicane before coming out there full power, full beams, and now charging down towards the second in the Mulsanne chicanes here. And whilst he perhaps hasn't got the straight line speed of some of the other cars around him, what can definitely be said about Yaya is where he's lacking in straight line speed, he's making it up for it more and more so in terms of overall apex speed. His apex speeds are very high here as he comes down to the second of the chicanes, and again using that snap downshift into second gear for the counterclockwise corner there, the right hander, in order to go through the corner as best as possible as he now makes his long way down towards the Mulsanne corner. And again going up through the gears, upshift into fifth gear at the latest possible moment when the turbo's completely drained, and now charging up towards the heavy braking zone here. He's going to be braking down from approximately 202 miles an hour, stamping on the brakes there, and as he comes in, can downshift to first in order to get the car to rotate through it, and he has to be very gentle on the throttle. You could see there how he had to straighten the steering wheel before he attacked the throttle and attacked the exit curve, because otherwise the car would have just simply tried to put so much power down through the rear wheels. Remember, this is a mid-engine rear-wheel drive car. All the cars here, as far as I remember, are mid-engine rear-wheel drive, so all that power, all that massive turbo goes through the rear wheels. There's not proper aerodynamics that you see in LMP1 cars here. We've gone back to the 1980s, and it goes to show, as we can see him go into Indianapolis full of courage there, coming down into second gear through the left-hander. You can see how late he went on the brakes. That is pure bravery and commitment. He knows the car can be trusted. And now into Arnage, coming all the way down to first gear there, a tiny bit wide of the apex there, just literally millimetres wide of the perfect line, but I don't think that's going to phase Yaya too much. He won't really notice that. He'll probably think to himself, okay, I've perhaps lost half a tenth there, but nothing more than that. It was such a slick run through Arnage, and now he's got only the Porsche curves and the Ford chicanes to go here. The most difficult part of the circuit for those who struggle with handling corners. You can see using the full whip, but going a little bit wide of the apex there initially into the Porsche curves, but he pulls it back together for the double left-hander here, and it's full attack on the throttle, and then swinging it into the right-hander here, and goodness me, it's going to give most people motion sickness to watch as he goes into the final left-hander here, up into fourth gear, and just keeping it within the track limits there, very nicely composed, and now coming all the way down to the braking zone towards the Ford chicanes here, and as he comes down through the gears, you can see just how hard he's coming it down through the gearbox as he makes his way out of the final corner to complete his lap, and that is going to be an open lap of a 3:19.0, a very strong lap, and K2 is going to come across the line with a 3:20.6. Crowhawk, meanwhile, even faster than Yaya, with a 3:17.6. Well, Yaya's lap looked phenomenal, but it was nothing compared to Crowhawk's. Clearly, as Kronik, the Australian, comes across for a 3:20.0, as we see Slim Yeezus there and Vox Bacchus getting in a little bit of a confrontation here, and we see the two drivers tripping over one. Now Slim Yeezus setting a 3:21.0, and Bacchus with what was in the end, well, he's been put down the order significantly, I believe, although we've got drivers jumping in and out of the pits. Bacchus for a 3:25.0, as a number of drivers are hopping straight back into the pits to get a fresh pair of rubber on before going back out once again. But we can see a number of drivers coming through. Peachy, the Estonian, with a 3:27.2, hasn't worked out his opening qualifying lap here, as we see Basler's come across the line with a 3:22.5, but a lot of drivers have gone into the pits, so this order is not accurate or indicative of what we can expect, as we see all of our drivers making their way onto their second flying laps or onto another out lap on a fresh pair. As we see right now, that does appear that Crowhawk is the fastest driver out on the circuit with that 3:17.6 being a dominant lap. Yaya being 1.5 seconds down as they make their way down towards, well, my goodness me, I think those two, they're just tripping over one another, and the stewards might be raising an eyebrow at that one a little bit, because that never needed to happen, to be honest, as we can see that Kronik right now in P3 with a 3:20.0, the best of the rest so far, as they make their way all the way down towards the first of the Mulsanne chicanes. You can see coming into that braking zone for the second of the Mulsanne chicanes, in fact, so we're a little bit late, and we're going to stay with the Mazda driver as he's on his second flying lap right now with slightly worn tyres, as he's going down into the braking zone and coming out of it a very nice and smooth run. In fact, 5.5 tenths faster than his previous best. So as a result, definitely a lot of potential out there for the Australian as he continues to make his way down towards the Mulsanne corner. And now coming into that braking zone, of course, he'll have to be as brave as possible, not using first gear to rotate the car through the corner, interesting enough, deciding to stay in second gear, perhaps perhaps considering the fact that by going down to first gear, he'd put too much through the rear wheel, so instead he's going for a smoother transition onto the power, and it seemed to work. He gained a tenth compared to his previous bets in that sector, and as he makes his way down towards the Indianapolis corner here, I think we're going to see a continued set of improvements as he makes his way into that braking zone. And you can see not quite as brave as what we saw from Yaya there by comparison. We're braking about, say, 5 meters earlier as we see K2 has had a disastrous run. And in fact, Chronic losing a tenth and a half there through the Indianapolis run. So as a result, not having the best run through that very tricky corner, as now he's only got the Porsche curves and also he's got the run through the Ford chicanes to go. As he's making his way down here, you can see building up that speed gradually, and he's heading up into the very difficult section here where he's got to nail it. And the turn in that Mazda is going to be something a little bit less convenient compared to the Porsche as he goes through the corner there, but getting a nice flying initially, but through the double left-hander he goes, clatters the wall, however, and he is starting to lose more and more time as he makes his way through the right into left finale of the Porsche curves here. And you can definitely see that Chronic not that composed as perhaps he would like to be right now as he makes his way down towards the braking zone for the Ford chicanes here. And will he be able to now? He straight lines the first chicane very nicely, and now going into the second one of the two. This is looking to be an improvement. It was a good final sector as he comes across the line. It's going to be a 3:19. It's a 3:19.2. He picked up a huge amount of time in the final sector, so that's where Chronic can improve. He can improve little bits around the lap still, but it's in the final sector where he needs that improvement. So we're looking at probably a 3:18.6 best potential from Chronic right now, but albeit he won't be able to reset to the pits, so he's going to do one more lap on more heavily worn tyres as we see Crowhawk is coming to the end of his out lap right now. And we look a little bit further around the order, we see Yaya trying to stay out the way of everybody, making his way around as we have got what looks to be, we can see Feel the Vibes on a personal improvement right now, making his way, charging down towards what is the Ford chicanes. And what's this going to be from the P6 drivers? He currently stands on a 3:20.9 the first time around. As he comes across the line this time, it is a 3:19.995, moving up to a provisional P4, but there's a lot of laps still to go out there, folks, of course, and it is looking very tight in the battle for the front two rows if you exclude Crowhawk's lap right now, which is well out there by 1.5 seconds, but everybody else in a tight competition for that P2 and joining Crowhawk on the front row as we see Slim Yeezus going on to his final flying lap. And we've only got half a minute to go before the timing board comes down to say that qualifying laps must be concluded, and Luco going on to a lap. And in fact, we're going to stay with the Sauber C9 driver for a little bit, just to give you a flavour of how much speed he's picking up by comparison with the rest of the drivers around here in what was touted to be going into this potentially the slowest car down the straight. What has Luco been able to achieve with the Mercedes Mobile as he makes his way into the left to right combination? And you can see here very tight on the apex there into the first part of the Tetra Rouge chicane, and doing a very good job, looking very composed is the Welshman, as his previous lap, it should be pointed out, 5.5 seconds off of Crowhawk, so that is what is a 3:23.0 approximately, or 3:23.1. Well, he is already up a little bit come the end of the first sector as he's now charging down the Mulsanne straight here, and we can see by comparison with Yaya, not far off in terms of top end speed. In fact, this is quite a respectable top end speed from the Mercedes Sauber driver, at 220 miles an hour into that braking zone for the first of the Mulsanne chicanes. So I think Luco has actually found quite a bit of speed in that gearbox, and as a result, it's not a car to be underestimated, as we said earlier on. As we see, he is half a tenth up on his previous best, as Dagon in the R92 CP by comparison is 4 tenths off of the Mercedes Sauber C9 driver right now, as he's making his way in the long run down towards the second of the chicanes. And again, building up the speed, not as much speed to be gained this time around as he comes down in towards this second braking zone. It's not as long a run as compared to the first one, but still, look at how composed it is. The difference, however, notice in his technique, he's going down to second more urgently by comparison with what we saw with Yaya and a number of the other drivers. As we say hello to Sweet in the chat, and I think what it is with regards to some drivers, they perhaps need the additional retardation force of that extra downshift early, whereas other drivers are using the downshift on the apex of the main part of the chicane to turn the car through the corner. So that is what we're seeing. Some of the driving styles are different. Of course, doing that downshift on apex will lift the car and it makes the car less settled, but perhaps that's what some of the tunes some of the drivers gone for. But we can see that Luco is now almost 6 tenths up on his previous best, so he struggled at the second of the Mulsanne chicanes from the run from there down towards the Mulsanne corner. And out. That's where he's picked up a lot of time as he's now building up even more speed down towards Indianapolis. Now, qualifying is about to conclude, and we can see that Yaya making his way down on the personal best right now. Chronic Opal going to come across the line, improves to a 3:18.6, putting in provisional P2 for the time being. So the Mazda driver only a second off of Crowhawk, the fastest man out on circuit. What else have people got under their sleeves, of course? Well, under their sleeves, well, K2 parked up right now. He will not be improving. Feel the Vibes as well parked up. He's had a disaster. We are trying to find who else is going around on circuit right now. Dagan's also parked up. Backus improves to a 3:24.2, but that's not enough to move him up from P11. As we see in the rear view camera there, that looks to be Basler. Well, no, it's not Basler. That is another one of our cars there who is running the stock livery for the Porsche 962. We didn't see them improve if they did, but Basler not able to improve there. As we see that ZenQ in the rear view pitch, he comes across the line and he improves to 3:23.0. Meanwhile, looking further back, we're just going to try and find some other drivers. We've got Luco coming through the Porsche curves. He's just completed it. Meanwhile, what about up front? Well, Crowhawk, where he improved to 3:17.4, so he's raised the bar even higher, has Crowhawk. As we've got Yaya coming through the Porsche curves as well. We're not able to see who's just come across the line, but Luco, he was up. Remember, he was up by 6/10 when we last looked at him. How much has Luco improved by in the end? It's going to be a 3:21. Well, that's a 3:21. Well, that says a 3:23.1, but I think it's a bit faster than that. It's a 3:21.7 there, ladies and gentlemen, putting up to provisional P9. And then we've got Crowhawk, who's gone around, and Yaya's come across the line to a 3:18.4. Yaya's got himself up to P2, and we have still got some drivers out on circuit, but I think everybody has completed their flying laps as it currently stands, unless I am very much mistaken. We're just looking around. Picciola is the final driver to complete a lap right now as he's making his way through the final part of the Ford chicane sequence. The Estonian, what can he do to improve? He's on the bottom at the moment, and he's going to be setting a 3:27.2, not enough to get himself off the bottom step. So that is qualifying complete, ladies and gentlemen, and what I can tell you is that pole position has gone to Crowhawk, the Croatian, with a phenomenal lap, a second clear of the field, a 3:17.4 in the 962C. Now, Yaya, P2, a 3:18.4, will line up alongside him, and then only 1.5 seconds behind him was the Australian of Chronic Opal with a 3:18.6. A valiant effort from the Mazda 787B driver, and showing that Mazda can be quick and it will be dangerous in the run on the first lap. Then we've got Feel the Vibes line up alongside him, who with the 3:19.9. There's a bit of a gap between our top three and then the rest of the field, it should be pointed out. Feel the Vibes really the best of the rest of the British driver, and then K2, who qualified what was effectively P5, will be starting at the back, of course, with that 24-place grid penalty, which means P5 will go to Basler, the German, there with a 3:20.7. And then what was P6 for ZenQ will become a P9 as he's got the 3-place grid penalty with that 3:20.7. So P6 has gone to Slim Yeezus, the Finnish driver there. And then alongside him in what will be a P7 will be a Luco 33 with the 3:21.7. The Sauber Mercedes driver will be looking to do it all in the race. And then in what will be, I believe that's going to be P8, will be ZenQ alongside him. And then in P9 will be Golden Dagan. He'll be starting in P9. And then Vox Bacchus will be starting in what is P10, and Pete Schürrle will be starting in P11. And then, of course, at the back of the pack will be K2, all said and done. As we say hello to Radioactive Goat in the chat as well. But what that really does mean right now is Crowhawk does seem to be the favourite, but given the fact we've got the weak slipstream in the race, that 1.1 second a lap difference is not going to be enough to give Crowhawk the ability to immediately slingshot himself away from the field. I think it's going to be the case that he will be the driver that everybody will just be trying to stay behind. And really, the question will be on the likes of Yaya, Chronic Opal, and a number of other drivers. Do they fight one another for position, or do they all just try and hang as close as possible to the back of Crowhawk in order to get themselves into that place where they can attack him on the final lap, because he won't be able to actually get away because of the tow situation. And what can Dagan do? Remember, Dagan's going to be starting quite far back down the order, but that R92 CP is going to be a monster in the straights. We've seen it rack up the fastest straight line speed of any car here to date with that 230 miles an hour down into Indianapolis. It's a monster on the straights, but he's got to keep it pointing in the right direction. That's the thing that Dagan's got to be wary of, because the understeer of that car is what's holding him back at the moment. As really, we're waiting now to get underway with race number 1. It should be coming within the next 2 to 3 minutes, if not sooner. But that 3:17.4, a very strong lap. The rumours down the paddock of 3:15s perhaps unfounded, or perhaps we were expecting those in NA Division 1 tonight, given though the times were potentially set by an NA Division 1 driver, as it's understood. But we did see some 3:16s, and perhaps some drivers have just got little aces up the sleeve, or perhaps drivers didn't quite hook up their laps. You never know. But we are now just waiting to get underway. And as I say, I think the drivers to watch out for, I think obviously Crowhawk is going to be the favourite of these races given his qualifying pace. But the drivers to really watch out for will be Krynik Opel with that Mazda 787B. Just for the simple fact that it's a little bit of an unknown compared to the Porsches, and it will have its advantages by comparison. We know Krynik is a very smart driver in terms of he doesn't look to make the moves on lap number 1. He'll look to make the moves right towards the end. But then again, we also have that concern of Luco. Watch out for the Sauber Mercedes driver. I reckon he's going to move himself up the order gradually. As we get the time of day change, and now everybody will be required to ready up. We've got the slipstream set back to weak and the fuel depletion set back to on now. And we will be getting underway very shortly for the opening 3-lap sprint. As we are just letting GT Sport take its time. So I think we are having a little bit of a difficulty in terms of getting our track to load. I think a number of drivers are experiencing this issue, however. We're just checking in with race control if anybody else is experiencing this. We are having some slight technical issues, I think, with the lobby. We're just waiting to see whether they can be clarified or rectified. So just bear with us a little bit, folks. We may be slightly delayed here. Yeah, it is being reported a number of drivers are experiencing issues with the lobby loading at the moment. So we might have a slightly delayed start. Yeah, well, it's getting reported by some of the other drivers here that the lobby is stuck in limbo. So we are going to have to reboot the lobby. Yeah, because we cannot leave the lobby right now. The lobby is stuck. And in fact, the lobby has completely died. So I am going to need... Oh, hold on. Right, we seem to be back. All right, we're back into lobby. So it looks as though everything is fixed. Sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen. We are just waiting for Chronic Opal to return and some other drivers to ready up or fix the technical issues. In fact, we've got Peachiola, who is just doing a quick restart and experiencing the pit bug. So the lobby has gone through some issues at the moment. As we can see the return of the Australian Chronic Opal there. Of course, with the delay, some drivers will be just sat in the pits waiting to get underway. Other drivers, meanwhile, will be thinking to themselves, okay, I can use this a little bit more practice time. But as I say, with regards to all three of the races tonight, even the 2 sprint races, which are 3 laps long, the difference between these races and last week, I personally think, is that they're going to be more strategic. You don't want to fight on the open laps, as we see a lot of drivers having to leave the lobby and then rejoin it due to bugs and issues right now. But for a lot of them, it's all about, you've got to just play the slipstream game here. If you fight too much and let the pack start to break away, then all the positions disappear with it. K2, of course, will have it all to do starting from the back. He'll, of course, be looking to try and achieve everything he can. We're looking to bounce back after what was a disastrous round number 1. Oh, and K2's got the potential. We have seen it time and time again from the Dutchman, where he has got the pace in the race and he's got the overall speed and ferocity. It's just he's got to find that rhythm. That's the thing he's got to get. And if he can nail it, there's no reason why he can't be looking at top 5s or even higher here, but it's just finding that rhythm, the consistency. As he makes his way into the Mulsanne corner here, a little wiggle under braking there. You can see the front end just deciding not to hook up as he goes a bit deep, and Slimmy is just deciding to do some donuts, coming out the Mulsanne corner there. And I should point out, ladies and gentlemen, if you're wondering about the penalty burn zones, we've got a good variety of penalty burn zones today. We've got the run out of the final part of the forward chicanes down towards the start-finish straight. Drivers must burn penalties before crossing the start-finish line. You've got the run down the first Mulsanne straight in towards the Mulsanne chicane number 1, and then the same out of the first chicane down towards the second Mulsanne chicane. And then coming out of the second Mulsanne chicane and the run down towards Mulsanne corner, we've also got the one out of Mulsanne corner in the run to Indianapolis, and we've also got one out of Arnage heading up towards the Porsche curve. So we have got the best part of what is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 penalty burning zones today, and given the rather unreliable nature of track limits, shall we say, at Circuit de la Sarthe as model GT Sport, I'm sure we're going to be seeing a number of penalties being burned, but they shouldn't have too much effect due to the weak slipstream, but we'll wait and see. We can see there in the chat, Lerb supporting on the Estonian of Peachiola there. Peachy, of course, just sat in the pits right now, getting ready to go. Now I'm going to take a very quick sip of water before we do get underway. And good evening to you, Vitor. Hope you're doing well. And thank you, Vitor. It's good to be here for Division 1. Alright, folks, we're about to start race number 1. I've had it whispered in my ear by race control. Any second now should be that countdown. As we see Dagan making his way down. Right, there's the countdown, ladies and gentlemen, of race number 1, 3-lap sprint. Who's going to be on top by the end of it? Let's find out. So as we pan down to the grid, then you can see on pole is Crowhawk and alongside him is Yaya. Which one of those two is going to have the run down to turn 2? Or will it be Krynik Opal and that Mazda who can jump the pair of them? Let's find out. And it's lights out and away we go for all of our drivers as they all try to get the best possible start in the run down towards the Dunlop chicane. Krynik Opal trying to go the long way round but going onto the grass immediately and then weaving back onto the grass, and that is a disaster for Krynik Opal. Straight into the wall with a little bit of an adventurous move there. We will take a look back, but as they go into turns 2 and 3, you can see Yaya being pushed wide and Slim Jesus getting the best run out of everybody out of the Dunlop chicane there. As looking further back, Feel the Vibes in P2, ZenQ up into P3, but Crowhawk and his inside to the outside of Tetra chicane. They go as ZenQ still on the inside there, and as they make their way through, they settle back into an order. Luco up into P5, the South Mercedes C9. We said it was going to creep up the order, and it already has. And Dagan in P6 right now. He's got Bacchus trying to weave on the inside into Tetra Rouge, but he can't find the space there. And so they make their way now down onto the Moleshead straight for the first time asking. You can see Basler weaving out alongside Bacchus there. And the drivers not settling down into an order in that battle for P7, but now they are once again, as we see Dagan just building up the speed right now and Feel the Vibes. He's ahead of Slim Jesus, getting past Slim Jesus in the run down towards the first of the Moleshead chicanes. But as they make their way to the braking zone here, are we going to see anybody go overly deep? Vox Bacchus goes incredibly deep and he tries to rejoin onto the apex there, knocking Basler a little bit wide as we see that K2 and by looks like PGL are able to avoid the Welshman, but as a result of him rejoining, they're now falling a little bit back off the pace. As we can see, our battle for P7 is already almost 5 seconds off our leaders as K2 and Basler go side by side in the run down towards the second Moleshead chicane. It's already kicking off on lap number 1, and I can tell you further up right now, Feel the Vibes still ahead as we've got Luco now up into P4. Dagan going very deep on the brakes there to the second of the chicanes, and ZenQ getting past, and now Dagan dropping down the order a bit and will be most likely falling backwards towards the battle for P7, and the P6 position will be going into that battle. Now meanwhile behind them you can see PGL ahead of Yaya and Bacchus behind them as all three try to fight over and squirm over the position for P9 here, and they make their way down to that braking zone for a turn where is the Moleshead corner as Slim uses there. P3 Crowhawk goes deep, Luco takes it up to P3 as ZenQ almost follows Crowhawk there, and you can see the Porsche drivers just seemingly not being able to keep the car together on those cold tyres and brakes on lap number 1 as Dagan in P6 is now catching back up to him, and this is where he'll thrive. He'll have that straight line speed to be nice and safe. As you see at the front of your camera there, going through the second kick, we've got Jesus versus Vibes. Vibes being hounded right now as behind them Crowhawk in P4 simply trying to hold on to that P4 position, and ZenQ over the back of him as they go to the braking zone for Indianapolis, but ZenQ not able to get alongside enough in order to make the move count as Luco picks up a half-second penalty for track limits on the entry to Indianapolis. And as they make their way for Arnage here, it's going to be a very tricky corner because of the fact that everybody's just trying to get the power down as quickly as possible, but the car's not responding as much as they like. Luco burn that penalty will drop down to what is expected to be P4, as you can see right now in the battle for what is P7. Basler ahead of K2 come the run out of Arnage up towards the Porsche curves right now as we see Luco down into P4 but hounding the back of the P3 man of Crowhawk as they all make their way into the handling sequence now, and Basler going a little bit wide there but keeping it together. Meanwhile up front, Feel the Vibes half a second clear of Slim Jesus now as they go to the sector where ZenQ's going to go around the outside of Luco there. That is some brave stuff as Luco goes wide and picks up another penalty, as does Golden Dagan, and you can see behind them we've got K2 and Yaya side by side. Yaya have dropped all the way down the order with that disastrous opening lap, now up to P8 and started to fight his way back into the order as they all make their way through the forward chicanes and continue to push round. Now meanwhile as we look to the front we see Feel the Vibes in P1 ahead of Crowhawk getting ahead of Slim Jesus with Jesus going wide out of the final corners. Then in P4 it's ZenQ followed by Yaya, then it is K2 in P6, Golden Dagan in P7, Basler in P8, then it's Vox Bacchus in P9 battling for P8 with Basler right now as they go down to the Dunlop chicane. Bacchus using the brakes, that Mazda 787B, he tries to go for the double move but he goes deep on the brakes. Dagan holds on to the position, Basler in P9 still as they make their way out of the Dunlop chicane, but Basler getting the better run of the two of them as we see Luco has dropped all the way down the order with that additional penalty to burn thanks to the Porsche curves there. Now he's down to P9 but he's getting up the order as quickly as he can as Basler tries to go all the way around the outside Race start for the German as they come up towards Tetra Rouge corner here, and as they make their way through, you can see that Dagan going wide once again. He'll be subject to at least a half-second penalty. I suspect that's going to be a 1-second penalty at this rate, as they all make their way down. Basler immediately pulling out the toe and trying to get ahead of Oxbackers here, but he can't find a way past the speed of that Mazda right now, can Basler, and that's the difference between the two cars. The Mazda's got the straight line speed, as Luco, look at that slingshot in the Sauber. This thing's just come alive or something. That's his hidden secret, and Basler trying to go as deep as possible in the brakes and missing his braking point completely, and almost rejoin there, knocks Luco in fact wide there. Basler not getting the car under control, and I think that's going to be one for the stewards, as Luco is almost hitting the back by Picciola there, as Peach has to lift out of it, and Basler down to P12. Now up front, Phil the Vibes, Crowhawk and Slim Jesus in that order are continuing to hold in position right now, this top three. I think they all just want to avoid fighting one another and wait until the end, although Crowhawk going very sideways there out of the second of the Mulsanne chicanes, as we see ZenQ in P4 right now, and K2 all over the back of him, trying to find every which way past. I think it's going to be the case as they make their way into the Mulsanne corner. K2 is going to be made to go around a long way round, but he'll have ample time to do it here, and indeed he does. And now ZenQ drops back into P5, knowing that discretion is the better part of valor, charging down towards the right-hander as they make their way out towards the braking zone here. They're 5.7 seconds off our race leaders, as ZenQ looks to move up the inside of K2 here, and I do think this is probably one of the worst time moves, because now he's essentially turned it into almost a free wide, as Yaya gets on the power way too soon there and almost loses control of the car. He has to back out of it, and Dagan back up to P6 as a result of that, but ZenQ and K2 not putting their differences aside have decided to fight for it early on rather than trying to get themselves back up into the hunt for the podium positions. They're setting their limits at P4, and that's what we're going to see the battle for as they make their way through Indianapolis once again, and K2 staying ahead right now, but ZenQ all over the back and lunging it up the inside of K2 here into Indianapolis, just having so much more confidence on the brakes is the Polish driver as they go down in towards the braking zone for an Archer, and K2 throwing it up the inside here of Dagan, and that's knocked Dagan wide, and he's into the wall, which hits the Yaya as a result, and Dagan having to lift out massively there to get the car under control. And I think it's going to be the case that there's going to be some people going to the stewards at the end of race one, immediately given this one, but you can see that Bacchus in P9 right now, Luco ahead of him a little bit, but the one driver we need to take a look back at is what happened to Krynik Opel at the start. So on board here with Krynik Opel, you'll remember that he tried to go the long way around the left-hand side, so he's going to have a slow launch initially, but he actually gets the better launch, and he goes around the outside Crow, but Crowhawk pulls over and knocks Krynik off there, and it was tears for Krynik, and that's what happened there, ladies and gentlemen, as he's now back in the battles here for what is P9, 8 and 7, as he's made his way past Basler and Luco there, literally fighting his way through the situation, as we see that Peachy Erla battling with Vox Bacchus, and they're going 2x2 for the Ford chicanes. You don't do that for the Ford chicanes normally, as everybody, it's a concertina effect, and everybody knocking each other nose to tail here, as we see it. Meanwhile, up front in that battle for P4, ZenQ versus Yaya, with K2 hand falling by the wayside, and ZenQ sending Yaya off into the abyss there. Oh, goodness me, and Yaya being reset to track. That is disastrous to the British driver. As you can see, ZenQ continues racing now versus K2, and meanwhile, up front, Crowhawk has got ahead of Phil the Vibes. We haven't been able to see that on track, but I suspect that's most likely happened due to slipstream or breaking down into Dunlop chicane. But remember, with that weak slipstream right now, it's going to flip. It's not going to be the case that Crowhawk's just going to disappear off up the road, as we see ZenQ is starting to pull a little bit away from K2 as they make their way down towards the Mulsanne chicane number 1. And as they push all the way down, once again, you can see that behind them, it is a very long gap to Yaya, who is now having to hold on to P6 for the rest of this race after the incident of Dunlop chicane there, going into lap number 3. But as they charge down towards the braking point here, you'll know that in Yaya's mind right now, he'll be fuming about that and thinking to himself that he's got it all to do once again in race number 2. But as they make their way through the right into left combination there, you can see that Picciola holding firm in P7 right now, and behind them Basler holding off Bacchus and Luco, and those two drivers falling away right now as they make their way down towards the second of the Mulsanne chicanes. Up front, I can tell you that Crowhawk has picked up a 1.5 second penalty for one of the chicanes. Track limits at one of them, no doubt, and as they make their way down towards the Mulsanne corner, he's going to have to burn that penalty coming out of the Mulsanne corner, so that is going to drop him quite a way down the order. In fact, that might drop him out of the hunt for the race win unless he can pull off a magical second half of the lap. We'll wait and see as they make their way through the right-hander here, and you can see that Crowhawk immediately, well, he should be burning the penalty, and he does. He has to get out of the way. He had Phil the Vibes and Yeezers, I think, trying to come round him, and that was why, but he's burnt the penalty, and he hasn't lost as much time as perhaps he would have because of the fact he had the little trip over there with Yeezers and Vibes. So we'll keep our eyes on that. That could open up once again, but K2 has got ahead of ZenQ now. I'm not sure what's happened to ZenQ, but he's dropped well down the order. Perhaps there's a penalty to burn turn there. But you can see that K2 up into P4 and Yaya being hounded by Basler once again as they make their way through the first kink in the run down towards Indianapolis here. And I think if Basler's going to do it, he's going to do it either just under braking into Arnage, as we see Yaya defending through second kink. And now as they go into the right-hander here, I think Basler's going to wait. He's going to wait until the run out of Arnage to Porsche curves here, because I don't think he'll feel comfortable knowing that Yaya will have the better brakes down into Indianapolis. And you can see the gap between them, as we see in the rear of your picture there. That is Vox Bacchus going wide in the Mazda 787B, dropping down the order to P11, and Dagan and Luco moving up to P9 and P10 respectively. But meanwhile, up front, Phil the Vibes is 7 tenths ahead of Slim Yeezus right now, and Crowhawk is catching up. This is our top three as it currently stands. They make their way through the Porsche curves here, and as they go into the left-hander, it's going to be the case. I think Slim Yeezus is under more pressure right now from the Croatian of Crowhawk as they make their way up towards the Ford chicanes. There's only 4 corners to go right now. Crowhawk looking to the inside of Slim. They go into the first chicane. There's no way through for Crowhawk right now. But meanwhile, coming through the final pair of corners to complete race number 1 and pick up the opening win of the night, it will be Phil the Vibes by 1.3 seconds ahead of Slim Yeezus, who just holds off Crowhawk in the end. K2, the Dutchman, as he makes his way through the Ford chicane here, will come home in P4 in what has been a fantastic effort for the Dutchman. Zenq in P5, albeit he's waiting at the moment, I think, to let Yaya back through to give the place back. Picciola in P7, and then it is going to be Golden Dagan coming home in P8 in the end, Luco in P9, then it'll be Krynik Opel coming across the line in P10 after Basler's got it very wrong somewhere. Bacchus burning down to P11 in terms of penalties, and Basler in P12, where it was looking reasonably good. It's gone wrong for the German. But that is your race results, ladies and gentlemen. Congratulations to all of our drivers, but to our race winner, Phil the Vibes from the United Kingdom. That is race number 1, ladies and gentlemen, and subject to any stewards' inquiries, which I think there are going to be a lot of them for some of the racing we've seen in race number 1. Phil the Vibes are bringing it home on the top step ahead of Slim Yeezus and Crowhawk. 1.5 seconds separating our top 3 in the end for that battle between Yeezus and Crowhawk coming down to literally the final stretch of tarmac. K2 picking up the P4, and then Yaya rounding off our top 5 there. Fastest lap going to Crowhawk on lap number 2, a 3:20.203. Quite close to what we've seen in qualifying, but not near our pole lap so far. That was race number 1, and now we await race number 2, which will probably kick off in the next 2 to 3 minutes. And for those wondering, tuning in, why our grid was a little bit different from the qualifying finishing order, we did have some drivers jump themselves back to pits immediately when the qualifying session ended. Plus, we had grid place penalties to apply, so that might be where there was a little bit of confusion for those of you watching in terms of why the grid was a bit different from what you saw at the end of qualifying. But I think everything was set correctly right now. And who is this elusive race control that seems to be living in my ear? We have to go deep. I mean, I wouldn't go too deep. You might find a lot of earwax there, but you never know. You might find gold there, love. I think a number of our drivers will be a little bit aggrieved, particularly at some of the track rejoins that we saw going through the Mulsanne chicanes in particular. And some of our drivers are reporting that right now. But we, to give you an idea, folks, we saw a huge number of incident reports come the end of round 1 last week, and we saw a large number of them being in EU Division 1. I think we are going to see quite a few just from that race one alone. But of course, not to poo-poo any of our drivers, everybody wants to win, but some of our drivers just need to have the book thrown at them very briefly to sort of say you can calm it down a little bit and still have great racing. But that's for the stewards to decide and for our drivers to report what's happening, not for me, as race number 2 is about to get underway. Another 10 seconds countdown. Who's going to be our winner come the race number 2? So if we pan down to the grid once again, you'll see it's Feel the Vibes on pole, and alongside him this time will be Slim Yeezers. But what can Yaya do from P5 and Chronic Opal in particular from P10? Can he recover his way up into the top 5 in race number 2? And it's lights out and away we go. And once again, we see all of our drivers getting a relatively good start. Not as much dramatics this time as they all make their way down towards turn number 1. But you can see Golden Dagan taking a very tight inside line there. Up into P5 already is the R92 CP. As K2 getting the mother of all launches off the line. And in fact, he's got himself up into P1. He's going to hold on to it as we do see that Slim Yeezers knocked wide a little bit there. And in fact, well, that wasn't Slim Yeezers got knocked wide. That was Peachy Erler we saw get knocked wide with the finish flag there. As we see Crowhawk has got back up into P2. And meanwhile, ZenQ now dropping down the order like a fly, as I think he was just knocked a little bit wide somewhere. In fact, a lot of our drivers here getting caught over the top of one another as we see our top 4 really breaking away, and K2 really caught out on the gravel there in the run to Tetra Rouge and causing a bit of a traffic jam, as already our top 4 have broken clean away from the rest of the field. And we can see that it is 4 of our Porsche drivers who have just broken away, and they're all starting to squabble for their positions in the slipstream train order. And Slim Yeezers is already out of the slipstream zone in the hunt for the race win. So now the pack from P5 back are effectively now going to have to work together if they want to finish up towards the front, as we see Chronic Opal going way too deep, and he's gone into the gravel. The Australian just cannot seem to get a lucky break, as we see K2 into the wall there as well. It's all blowing up behind. Meanwhile, our top 4 are just simply having the time of their lives running away, although Slim Yeezers right now is breaking away a little bit from the rest of the field, running from left to right, and I think he's just trying to get some heat in his tyres. A number of the drivers, given how much space they've got, can afford to do the weave in our top 5. They've got so much space out on circuit, as we see that Bacchus right now will be looking to catch up to the back of the fin ahead of him. The Mazda 787V will have the legs to do it, and Luco behind. I think he'll be grateful, the Welshman right now, that he's right in behind his fellow countrymen and able to use the toe of the P6 man in order to chase after the higher positions as they make their way in the long run down towards the Mulsanne corner. And we can see all of our race leaders just tucking in behind one another once again and not doing anything majorly difficult, as we can see that Slim Yeezers right now starting to catch up to him. In fact, he has got that gap down, and I think there's just been these little taps and squabbles with our top drivers, which has led to them falling back a little bit. In fact, Slim Yeezers has caught up to them very quickly. So in fact, it looks as though our drivers down to P8 and now P9 are starting to catch back up to the race leaders, as we see them all make their way through the second kink of what is the run to Indianapolis. Feel the Vibes him up into P2 right now, and then in the rear of your picture we see that Luco up into P6. Bacchus not seemingly having as much speed naturally in that Mazda 787B, and Luco actually is the driver who really is strong in that toe. That little car doing a fantastic job of just building up the speed as they make their way through the right-hander at Arnage here, and we are hearing that Peachy Erler is having gearbox issues and is well down the order right now, so it's gone from good to bad to disastrous in race number 2 for the Estonian, as he's essentially running at the back and trying to get that gearbox back in place as they make their way through the Porsche curves. They start to make their way in, and there's no real change in order right now as we look a little further back and we see that Basler trying to find his way past Fox Bacchus here, and he's got the manoeuvrability he has in the Porsche 962C, but will he be able to have the confidence to throw it around the outside like we saw earlier with ZenQ versus Luco? Going around the outside of the Porsche curves with the right setup is possible, but it requires a lot of bravery, and we see Dagan there in the back as we see that Bacchus picking up a half-second penalty for literally a near the margin cut. But meanwhile, as they make their way out of the final corner onto lap number 2, Crowhawk ahead of Feel the Vibes. He's 1.2 seconds ahead as he goes on to lap number 2, and Feel the Vibes in P2, ZenQ in P3, Yaya in P4, then we've got Slim Yeezers in P5, and our top 5 are pulling away a little bit as Luco is trying to catch up to them right now, and will try to use the handling of the Sauber Mercedes C9 through the upcoming chicanes in order to close that gap as much as possible, as we see that ZenQ has had a disastrous run through what was the Dunlop chicane there, and as a result dropping down to P5, and this is the opportunity that Luco will have wanted, as we note that Basler up into P7, he's overtaken Vox Bacchus and now making his way after Luco. He's going to have to really push as the German though if he wants to catch up to the fast driving Welshman ahead of him, who is doing everything he can to try and get up into that top 5 battle as they make their way then through the Tetra Rouge corner, and you can see that Luco having a very difficult run through Tetra Rouge by comparison as they all make their way around onto the Mulsanne straight once again, and Luco not in the slipstream. He's just out of the slipstream of the guys ahead, not able to capitalise right now as we look backwards towards Bacchus. in P8 and Dagan in P9, making his way down the straight here and building up that speed versus Vox Bacchus. Will there be a move? And not currently. Chronic Opal again trying to get back into this fight as we see K2 and Peachy are much further down the order, and Peachy with those gearbox issues making his way around the circuit still. But meanwhile, up front, we can see Crowhawk now 1.5 seconds ahead of Feel the Vibes. And in fact, our top four really spaced out. And ZenQ falling a little bit back off of these guys right now. But I think they're all just settling down into a rhythm as we see that Luco as well, again, being closed up by Basler gradually. But he has really got a lot of speed in that Sauber Mercedes. He's really worked on getting that car set up for the straights here as much as it is for the corners. And perhaps it's coming at the cost to serve the medium and low speed handling. As we saw, he had a rough time there through the second of the Mulsanne chicanes. And Basler now is definitely going to be there and ready to strike as they make their way down towards the Mulsanne corner. Is it going to be an attack as we look back here from Luco's vehicle, and Basler deciding not to go for it, instead playing the smart move here and just staying behind. But there's going to be a little bit of contact as Basler not as strong on the brakes by comparison and knocking Luco a little bit wide, but he's lifted out of it by the looks of things and keeping it calm. As you can see behind, meanwhile, that Dagan, Bacchus and Chronic Opal now literally all on the back of one another here, and I think Chronic Opal and Bacchus will have to make a decision in it. Do they try and find a way past the R92 and then just drop it, or do they let the R92 pull them along? Because look at the gap, ladies and gentlemen. That R92 is pulling away right now despite offering a double weak toe to the cars behind. That's how strong that Nissan is, and that's why Dagan feels so strong on these straights here and why he can just comfortably keep the car on the racing line. He doesn't have to go defensive into those braking zones. Meanwhile, Bacchus and Chronic Opal battling into Arnage here, and we've got a yellow flag at Arnage. What has happened? As it looks as though ZenQ has had a moment. What has happened to the Polish driver? So making his way through Indianapolis then in P5 at this time. I think it's going to be case. Does he get on the power just a tiny bit too soon through the corner, or does he go too deep entirely? Goes through the corner here, rides it high in the apex curve and just gets on the power too soon, and the car says no. It puts itself into the wall. ZenQ will be recovering now as they make their way into the second half of lap number 2, and we can see that behind, Slim Yeezus really is falling off the back of Crowhawk, and Crowhawk is able to break away here. Yeezus and Yaya battling for that P2 right now, and I think Crowhawk will be happy to let these two just contest the position and just run off into the distance. So we see Feel the Vibes trying to get in there. And with all that kicking off, Basler now up into P5 with Luco there, dropping down the order a bit. But Basler's going to have to burn that penalty. He's going to have to pull off the line here, as we see that Luco also put off the line, but he hasn't got a penalty as Luco. So perhaps he feels he's caused an incident somewhere. We didn't quite catch what's happened to Luco, but he's dropped away down the order and there was no penalty on the car. But what this does mean is that Chronic Opal is now up into P6 and the recovery drive is underway for the Australian right now. If he can get himself up into the top 5 come the end of this lap, I think he's going to be giving himself a pat on the back and knowing that the bad luck is finally going away. But we'll wait and see. He's still got one more lap to go. As meanwhile, up front, I can tell you that Yeezus and Yaya are still battling, and albeit that Yeezus almost in the toe of Crowhawk, and I think Yaya might give him a very gentle tap on the rear end in order to try and catch up to Crowhawk here, as we see Crowhawk, in fact, just losing a bit of time right now, and looks like he's weaving on the straight a little bit. We saw that earlier from some of the drivers up front. I'm not sure exactly why they need him to weave down the straight, but still, if it goes with the slogan of the team there, completely out of control, then perhaps he's just not in control of the car. But we'll wait and see as they make their way through the first of the Mulsanne chicanes here, and we can see that Yaya with Slim Yeezus down the back of him here as they make their way charging down towards the second of the Mulsanne chicanes, and Yaya looking for a way through here, but he hasn't quite got the overspeed that he'd like, and as a result has to tuck back in right now. Still looking for a way through is the British driver versus the Finn as they go into the braking zone for the second of the Mulsanne chicanes, and there's no way through, and Vibes is closing up, as meanwhile Basler being caught by Chronic Opal, but not a huge rate of knots is Chronic right now, as he's really taking time to build out speed. But Golden Dagan right now is getting ever closer to the back of the Australian, who has a phenomenal run there through the second of the Mulsanne chicanes compared to Basler, and this is where Chronic will want it to be. This is where he'll wanted it, and he's going to go for the run now around the outside down towards Mulsanne corner. Can he do it in the 787B? It screams down the outside of Basler here, but the Porsche 962 sees Turbo, says no, and continues to try and hold. But in the end, the Mazda just has the legs, and into the braking zone they go, and Basler heavy on the brakes, but Chronic Opal braver, but he goes a bit deep, and Basler overextends it and sends Chronic wide, and Basler does wait for Chronic there, but I think Chronic once again will be fuming. He just cannot get a break. But what that does mean is that Dagan is now up into P5, and the Nissan R92, the one car that struggles through the corners but loves the straights, is now into a top 5 position, as we see behind that Luco ahead of Chronic, with Chronic getting that knockoff, and Basler has not given the place fully back yet, as we note that Luco in P P7 is trying to find his way up into that P6 position, recovering as quickly as he possibly can. As meanwhile, up front, I can tell you that Crowhawk has been pulled in by Slim Yeezus and Yaya, but no change there as Basler, meanwhile. Well, what has happened here? I can tell you that Zenq's in P9 right now, so something has gone very wrong there. He's got himself up into P9, so he's appeared out of nowhere. I think he's jumped Vox Bacchus there under braking into the corner. As they all make their way down in towards the Porsche curves here, what I can see is that up front, it is the case that Crowhawk a second ahead, but he is being reeled in by the chasing pack here. Will anybody be able to capitalise, or will Crowhawk perhaps make a mistake and pick up a penalty? There's only 4 more corners to go for the race leader. 2 more corners now, and as he goes into the final 2 corners, he completes race number 2, and it's going to be a win for the Croatian by 1.2 seconds ahead of Slim Yeezus, who held off Yaya in the end. Feel the vibes in P4, and look at this! Golden Dagan holds on to P5 in the end to bring the Nissan home, and he'll be well chuffed with that as he comes across the line here in P5. Chronic Opel in P6 in the end. A good recovery drive there by the Australian. Basler in P7, Zenq in P8, Luco in P9, Vox Bacchus in P10, K2, the Dutchman here, making his way down towards the Ford chicanes. And as he comes his way through the corners right now, only 2 more to go, and K2 will be thinking, what do I have to do to have a clean and consistent night? Well, still, he's coming across the line, happy that P11 as he flashes his lights, and Pichiello with those gearbox issues, now just making his way down through the Porsche curves here. He's only got 4 more corners to go after this left-hander. Gets it nailed up very nicely here, the number 908 car. The Estonian not having the best of second races, but still getting in the track time. And you never know what could happen in the feature race in race number 3, where we have that strategy element, and that could play into his hands and give him a couple of positions. But we'll wait and see as he makes his way out the final corners, completing our race order. Congratulations to him and all of our other drivers, but a special congratulations to our winner, Crowhawk from Croatia. What a fantastic race number 2. And as always, your race results subject to any stewards' inquiries, which I think, again, there'll be a number of them going in the logbook from what we saw from our cameras. Crowhawk picking up the win there. 1.1 seconds ahead of Slim Yeezus, and Yaya just missing out on that P2 in a valiant battle between himself and Yeezus. Phil the Ives in P4, he'll be happy with that, albeit it wasn't as high as a result as he would have liked. And then Golden Dagan there rounding off our top 5 with a surprise result perhaps in the R92 CP. You love to see a non-meta car finishing in that top 5. But fastest lap, a 3:19.282 from Yaya there on lap number 3. More towards what we saw at the best possible laps in qualifying, and we'll wait to see what can happen in the race as the fuel loads do come down as well. Race number 3 will be coming at you within the next 5 minutes, as far as I'm aware. But we are just waiting right now with regards to race number 3. I can tell you things are getting very heated down in the paddock between a couple of drivers. I won't mention names, but there are a couple of drivers who are really kicking off right now. The gloves are getting out a little bit, but we will wait and see what happens out on circuit, of course. But I think some of the rivalries and tensions from round number 1 are reopening. The wounds are definitely reopening in round number 2. As we're just waiting now for race number 3 to get underway. We can see they're making his way out of the pits. Pichiello just getting himself back out. And Pichiello, of course, whilst not the fastest driver out on circuit, we've got a lot of love in the stream chat for Pichiello right now. The Estonian doing everything he can just to get the car around the circuit. But we are just waiting now to get underway with race number 3. As we're getting the time of day change, plus also the switch to the 6 laps. Now, of course, the big question will be in this one, it's a feature race. And as a result, we have the mandatory pit stop. Now, our drivers must pit at some point in the race. But it has to be on any lap other than the final lap, of course. When do you pit? That's the big question. Now, we have seen that the tyres do seem to pick up some degradation around lap number 3, lap number 4. So I would say, if you're feeling brave, you might want to pit after lap number 2, go for the tyre change, and then just simply hammer it. Because the thing is, on 4 laps with a little bit less fuel in the car, with the ×2 fuel multiplier, it'll be the case that the car's a bit lighter, and so where it'd normally pick up the wear by lap number 3, it'll pick up the same wear by about lap number 4 if you have a clean run on the tyres. Of course, you could gamble and just decide, you know what, I'm not going to change the tyres, but I'll pit early to give myself an undercut. And I think for a number of drivers here, given how long the pit lane is, the pit lane time here, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, the pit time loss for a tyre change is approximately 28 seconds, I want to say. It might be a little bit less than that, might be just 24. As we're about to get race number 3 underway, it'll be interesting to see what drivers go with. But I definitely think anyone down the back who goes for an undercut may jump a good number of places as we're about to get underway then with race number 3. But as we pan down to the grid, once again, it'll be Crowhawk on the right-hand side this time. On the left, it'll be Slim Yeezus. Behind them, Yaya and Feel the Vibes. But what can Chronic Opal do now? He's moved up to P6. And watch out for Voxback as he'll want to jump up from P10. That's lights out and away we go for all of our drivers here as they immediately start to pull up towards turn number 1, and you can see Chronic Opal getting as tight as possible to the inside here. He'll put him on the outside for turn number 2, but he gets himself up into P3 as they go charge out. He's up into P2 as Chronic Opal, and can he make the place stick as he's knocked on the back, but he keeps it together. The Australian has jumped the best part of 5 places on the opening start there, and you can see that Slim Yeezus got the best run out of anyone up into turn 1, but that's going to disrupt a lot of strategies as Golden Dagon has dropped down to P7. And I think the Porsche drivers have all been caught a little bit napping compared to Slim Yeezus as Chronic Opal has made his way up the order. And we can see that Luco, by comparison, has dropped into P10 as per the starting positions and back us up into P9 as they push out of Tetra Rouge and now down onto the straight. And the question will be, of course, is who's going to put the pressure on nice and early as we see Chronic Opal up into the lead so far. But now it's the slipstream games as Slim Yeezus tries to hold to the inside versus Chronic Opal down into what is the first of all chicanes. Chronic Opal going defensive immediately, so he does not want any of the drivers behind to immediately get through here. He wants to bunch the field up, and as a result of that, it's going to be some tactics deployed here. I think what Chronic's trying to do is trying to get everybody behind him to scorable in order to cause themselves to lost time, as we see Zenq meanwhile in P5 just looking on, and in P6 it's Phil the Vibes further back. Golden Dagon now building up the speed in the Nissan machine in P7, and Basler in P8. Luco and K2 are looking on. K2 as Voxback, I believe, has had a mistake under braking into the first of the moles and chicanes, but we can see that Chronic Opal still leading right now. The 787B just holding on, and everybody else is tucking in behind and simply acting as a spectator as they all charge down towards the Mulsanne corner. And as they continue to build up their speed here, you will see that Slim Yeezus and the guys behind it will build up and get on the offensive versus Chronic Opal. Will Chronic defend this one into the Mulsanne corner as we see Yeezus there lagging a little bit behind, and that's something that's going to be on the mind of Chronic Opal as they go into the right-hander here, and he nails the corner perfectly as we can see that Crowhawk versus Phil the Vibes on the inside and Zenq following through there, but everybody just getting into those little nip and tuck situations right now, but nobody wanting to go for any big moves after what we saw in the end of the first sector right now. So everybody has calmed down significantly as they make their way down towards Indianapolis here, although in the rear of your picture you can see right at the back we've got K2, well, it's not K2 I should say, that is Luco versus Peachiola, and Peachiola has dropped down to P11 with Luco making the pass for P10. Now looking up front, we can see, we've got it all kicking off here as they make their way for Indianapolis, and we have got, I think that's Yaya into the wall there, and it's all really kicked off. Spill the Vibes is backed off. Drivers literally tripping over one another left, right and centre, and as a result of that, ZenQ is up into P4. Luco has jumped up the order as well, but everybody, I think people are trying to lift off right in the middle of the circuit to let other drivers through, but it's literally exploded on circuit right now, and well, Picciola has been the one to really lose out, because you can see him spinning there right at the back. But meanwhile, up front, Chronic Open and Slim Users have just disappeared off up the road, as K2 is in a peaceful P3 right now, and ZenQ battling with Basler. He's got past Basler in the run-up to the Porsche curves here, as they make their way through. ZenQ, of course, having a very strong tune through these curves, as we all know, and he makes his way into the left-hander coming up very shortly, and you can see behind Yaya really trying to get past. He's got past Basler through the sequence, and as they make their way in the run down towards the Ford chicanes here, I think it's going to be the case that Basler versus Crowhawk, where they come into the braking zone, and Yaya and Crowhawk immediately jumping into the pits. They're going in early here, as we see behind. Feel the Vibes also doing the same, and the COC Racing Mobiles there all deciding to hop in, or a good number of them, 3 of them hopping in immediately as they make their way up towards turn number 2, and we can see that Chronic Opal leading right now ahead of Slim Users and K2 and P3. P4 ZenQ followed by Basler, who's getting very close to the back of the pole. The German really trying to get back at the Polishman after his overtaking to the Porsche curves. Then it is Luco versus Vox Bacchus, as Bacchus goes too deep into the Dunlop chicane, and that's going to be dirt on his tyres, plus also a track limits penalty. As we see behind Golden Dagan in P8 right now, Peachy Erler in P9. Well, no, he's not in P9, he's going to come back P12. What the guys who pitted will come out. He's up into P11, and he's got Crowhawk and Yaya ahead of him right now. And the thing is, for Crowhawk and Yaya and Feel the Vibes, if Peachy finds a way past all 3 of them, well, particularly for Feel the Vibes, they'll need to get back past him urgently, because Peachy hasn't pitted yet, they just have. And as a result of that, if they do not find a way past, Peachy could literally scupper their strategy of undercutting on lap number 1 as they make their way down towards Techerucci, and Feel the Vibes will be really feeling this right now. He'll know that he's being held up as they make their way through the right-hander of Techerucci, and you could see how already Crowhawk and Yaya are pulling away significantly, albeit with that weak toe. It's not going to be too much of a factor, as Crowhawk and Yaya are going to blows, and Crowhawk being knocked in the side there, and the two just need to settle it down, as Slim Users has dropped Chronic Opal here briefly, as Chronic is down into P2. I'm not sure what's happened there. Let's try and find out. Well, he'd been dropped already coming out of the chicane. I think Chronic may have made a mistake through the first chicane, or going through Techerucci picked up a penalty. He's picked up another half-second penalty, so this is enabling Slim Users to run away right now. And in fact, K2 is being caught by ZenQ, and given the fact that K2 is 5.7 seconds down on Chronic won't be too phased by this, but it is looking as though Chronic is just having some early mistakes coming and crippling his chances of getting the win here, as indeed every second he loses now, he's got to worry about the guys who are down in P10, also in P9 and back, as we see ZenQ getting closer to the back of K2. And in the rear of your picture, we've got Basler there, as Luco up into P6 is battling with his fellow countryman Vox Bacchus, although Bacchus a little bit further back right now, as we've got Golden Dagan in P8 there, just making his way out the Mulsanne corner. Now Crowhawk versus Yaya, they come down to the braking zone for the Mulsanne corner here, and you can see all keeping it line astern for the time being, as Peachy Erler still ahead, and you can see Feel the Vibes getting it very wrong, almost putting it in the wall. They're just keeping it together, but Vibes, you could tell, really wants to be past the Estonian. He knows he's got more pace to unleash, but he can't find a way past immediately, as we believe the Estonian has been able to fix his gearbox issues and is starting to look a little bit more sprightly on the straight. So perhaps Peachy Erler here has been able to fix things at the right time, as they make their way in the long run around towards the left-hander here. And as they come through Indianapolis, it is the case that I think Peachy is going to get caught in a minute by Feel the Vibes under braking into Arnage. Vibes is all the way over the back of him, and he goes a bit deep. I think there was I'm not 100% sure there was contact, but there was lag, and I think Vibes backing off of it there because of the contact. So as a result, not able to find a way through it, and the frustration is building as we look back up front, and we can see Jesus is being pulled back in by Chronic, who has burned his penalty, and ZenQ has passed K2. We didn't see that on camera, but he has made the pass happen, and up into P3 right now as they make the way through the Ford chicanes. And as they come through the corners here, I think it's going to be one of those instances now where K2 just has to tuck back in, and does he look for the move, as we hear that Basler has come into the pits and what was P5 at the time, and Luco making his way through. He's got a little bit of a penalty still to burn as he comes across the timing line right now. He burns the penalty quickly, and we can see that Bacchus also into the pits, who is battling with him. But ZenQ and K2 right now making their way out the Dunlop chicane, and as they charge down towards the Techerucci chicane, meanwhile K2 all over the back of the Polish driver here, the Dutchman hounding by comparison, as we see that Luco Luco, and Dagan is now up into P6, and Crowhawk, Yaya and company all coming up through the order very rapidly here as we hear that Basler is still in the pits. And as they change the tyres over here, this is how much time he'll have lost out in terms of being in those little battles, as we see that Crowhawk already up into P7 and Yaya following through, and Feel the Vibes now finally getting himself up into P9 and dropping Peachiola. But he's cost himself a lot of time. He's lost 4 seconds to Yaya. That's how much time he lost behind the Estonian. Not to the fault of the Estonian, who drove a valiant effort, of course, as he makes his way down towards Tetra Rouge, does the Brit right now. But up front, Chronicle after the slipstream down into the first of the Mulsanne chicanes. It's going to be the back and forth between these two as they build up speed towards the second of the Mulsanne chicanes. And we see Yeezus here flashing his lights. I think trying to get the signal through to the Australian. Look, I'm not going to pass, let's not fight. Because remember, as they make their way down to the braking zone here once again, it's going to be the case that they need to work together. They cannot afford to fight one another, because if they do, they're going to lose so much time. As you can see, Yeezus all over the back of Chronic initially, but as they go into the acceleration phase, this is where the Mazda opens up a little bit. To tell you what the gap between these guys is and our drivers who pitted on lap number 1, the gap at the moment is 27.5 seconds, so it's going to be literally on the limit in terms of a pit stop right now, in terms of where they come out. So I would say for Chronic and Slim Yeezus, if they decide to pit soon, they need to do it urgently, because otherwise they're going to find themselves potentially falling out behind, as Slim Yeezus makes a little bit of an oversteer moment coming out of the Mulsanne corner there, and now charging down towards the Indianapolis corner. We can see behind that K2 getting it very wrong into the Mulsanne corner here, but keeping it together all the same just about, as Luco has fallen some way down, and I think that's been the case. He's had to burn some penalties somewhere or made a mistake, as we see Dagan in P6 right now, and Crowhawk continuing to build as Yaya behind him. These two working together. You can see that through the fact that they're just not fighting one another, and that gap is not opening up between them and our race leaders, as Yeezus and Chronic are battling down into an arch right now. And again, I really do have to wonder whether there's the need to battle like this between the two of them, because they're only destroying one another's races. But we'll see what's going to happen as they come across the timing lines and when they pit, as ZenQ now looming a little bit in the rear of your camera shot, as we can also see K2 back there as well, making their way down towards the Porsche curves here. And I think it's the case that with that little bit of squabbling, that might just be enough for Crowhawk to jump up into the order, as we see a Luco in P5 right now. We suspect this is approximately what will be about P10 out on circuit once the strategy element plays in, and Dagan also trying to get back up into the mix here, as we see Crowhawk and Yaya really pushing up the order. And in fact, now the gap is 27 seconds to them and the race leaders here. I would say for Chronic Opel or Yeezus, one of the two of them should really ideally pit right now, but they're both staying out another lap. And I think this is too much for them. I think they needed to pit, because otherwise they're just going to cost one another time if they fight. Unless unless one of them's going to decide just not to fight anymore. Perhaps Chronic will decide not to fight, as ZenQ jumps into the pits from what was P3, and this should bring him out in approximately what will be about P6 come the transition over at the stop, as Luco is also into the pits and Dagan follows as well, which means that right now Crowhawk and also Yaya, pardon me, will be making their way through, as we see Chronic Opel has got himself back up into the race lead for the time being. But meanwhile, the guys behind will Crowhawk now 25 seconds, so the gap has come down enough now that these guys will have jumped our race leaders, we believe, based on the timing sheets, should they come into the pits on the next lap. So Crowhawk and Yaya have just simply played this one smart and decided not to fight, and it's worked out tremendously for the pair of them as they make their way up towards the Dunlop chicane right now. Now behind, I can tell you that ZenQ has come back out in P5, K2 has come out in P6, and Feel the Vibes, because of him being caught up behind Peachiola, has dropped all the way down to P7. And Peachiola, I don't think he's pitted right now, but he's still out there in P8. He's having fun out there, and he's definitely deciding, you know what, I'm just going to go racing and be a nuisance to everybody. And it's good to see the Estonian having some fun coming to life right now, as Basler's come out behind him and not the rear of Peachiola's car there. But as you can see, Basler with the fresher tyres here, trying to find every which way past, but he just can't find it. But he will on the Mulsanne straight now, that is certain, as they make their way onto the first part of the split straight. Now behind them, Luca's come out of the pits in P10, Dagan in P11, and then Bacchus in P12. All these drivers will be looking to get their way back into the fight come the end of the race. But meanwhile, our race leaders, well, Slim Yeezus has had something very wrong happen. Let's take a look back. And I think that gap had already opened up. So I think Slim Yeezus might have picked up a penalty, perhaps the Tetra Rouge, but that is a huge gap that has opened up. And in fact, that gap is so large right now that Chronic Opel has, in fact, got the gap open back up to 25 seconds here. So he may be a little bit safe, but we'll have to wait and see as they're making their way down towards Indianapolis. It's going to be very close between our top 5 right now in terms of who comes out where after the pit stops, and in terms of whether taking tyres on or not. But let's take a look at the tyres on Chronic's car. You can see that they're quite heavily worn. Will he gamble and decide not to change tyres? That'll be the question. You can see, meanwhile, the Porsche behind of Slim in a much better state tyre wear-wise, and then the guys behind are Crowhawk, Yaya, and also what is Zenq. Well, Zenq went for the tyre change here, and it's dropped him to 11.3 seconds behind, but he was doing that fighting earlier on, so as a result, it's been chop and change. As Phil Device looking for the battle and for the push through on K2 here, but not able to find it, and as a result, stuck in P7 for the time being. As behind, we see that Basler in P8 and Picciola in P9. He's got the move done down the straight before the Mulsanne corner, but again, Basler losing out a significant portion of time versus our Estonian driver and versus the field up front. And remember, Peachy knows he's probably going to fish towards the back of the field, but he's just enjoying himself as much as he can, as really this has been a night to forget, but he's going to go out on a bang. Luco in P10, Bacchus in P11, and then behind Dagan with a half-second penalty for track limits, I should point out, through the Mulsanne corner there. He'll need to burn that off soon enough. Up front, Krynik Opel coming into the pit, so this is the critical pit stop right now for the Australian driver. Where is he going to fade out into the rest of the field as Jesus also comes into the pit? 2 more laps to go for these drivers, as Yaya right now has got ahead of Crowhawk, it should be pointed out, so the two of them have changed places. We didn't catch that, but they have changed places right now as they're making their way out of the Porsche curves and up into the Ford chicanes. How is it going to change? That is the question, as Phil Device has got past K2, I've just heard, and we can see that right now in the pits, they're still waiting to service the car of Krynik Opel. He's pulled into the box right now as Yaya is coming out of the Ford chicanes there, and he's going to come across the timing line. Now, where is Krynik Opel going to come out? He comes out ahead, in fact, and I think Krynik Opel has decided not to go for the tyre change. He's gone for the gamble, and he's going to see if it's going to work. And Yaya has gone, well, no, Yaya, we're not talking about here. We're talking about Slim Jesus. Jesus decided not to go for the tyre change either, and whatever it was, whether it was a mistake or a penalty, as a result, has dropped him out behind his 2 opponents in the Porsche 962s, and with that half-second penalty, that's going to hurt him even more, and he needs the slipstream going down the Mulsanne straight, but this is going to cost him a good chunk of it as they make their way down through to Tetcherouge here, and you can see that the 2 Porsche drivers ahead of him really pressing on to hunt down Krynik Opel right now, and Krynik 2.5 seconds, 2.6 seconds is the gap, and he'll be hoping he can keep that gap alive for just a little bit longer before it gets down to 2.25 seconds, and that's where things will start to involve the toe and where his Mazda straight line speed will be robbed, as we can see that behind Zenq still 11 seconds down on our top 4 right now and chasing after him. Phil Device hunting as well, as Crowhawk and Yaya have changed places into the Mulsanne chicane there, but this little bit of battle in between them has caused the gap between them and our race leader to open up very slightly, but you can see now as they're making their way down the straight, tucking in behind one another and doing a little bit of bump drafting off the back of one another to try and catch up to the Mazda ahead of them. Krynik Opel having to literally work the rotary engine like a madman right now, but if he can hold on for just 1.5 more laps, it could be a race win or at least a podium for the Australian driver, and how dearly that would mean to him, as we see that Zenq making his way down right now and wishing he could be up there, I suspect, as K2 looking to hunt him down, and Phil Device still in this battle with the Dutchman for P6 as they make their way into the second of the Mulsanne chicanes, not able to find a way through it once again, having to back it off as they make their way through, and I think both of them recognising that they've got the opportunity to sneak into the top 5 here, as K2 picks up a half-second penalty for track limits there, which I think that's a little bit confusing because I couldn't see where he cut the limits personally, but still the white line's lying as he makes his way in behind Phil Device. Vibes getting up to P6 after a small burn there from K2, as we can see that behind them Basler just simply pulling away from Picciola at the moment. He's got past Peachy going to pit on the final lap, of course, the final pit window lap, and that is this lap, as we see Luco in P10 right now, Voxbach in P11 and Dagan all the way behind in P12. Now up front, I can tell you that Krynik Opel, 2.8 seconds is the gap between himself and the drivers behind, but on their fresher tyres, you can see that Krynik Opel is being reeled in now that we're into the handling section. This is where the Porsches are just so strong, but then again, we've got one more acceleration zone here, and Krynik Opel getting a really good run out of Arnage in the run down towards the Porsche curves here, and this is where Krynik needs to maximise every straight. He's got to now getting on the power, as the 3 Porsche 962s behind him are salivating for the race win, but of course they need to make sure not to fight one another. As you can see, Yaya and Crowhawk literally nose to tail. Slim Yeezer's trying to hang in there as well as they all make their way through the double left-hander sequence for the right into left. And as they make their way into the final left-hander of the Porsche curves here, we've now got the Ford chicanes coming out, and you can see how close they're getting to Krynik Opel. They've stripped almost a half a second out of him in the Porsche curves alone, and he needs to nail the Ford chicanes right now going on to his final lap. But you can see they are now into that tow zone, and Krynik Opel has got to try and open it up as he goes on to the final lap, because they will now get the distant tow as Crowhawk has picked up a 2.5 second penalty for track limits of the Ford chicanes, and he will have to burn that. He was meant to have burnt that coming out of the final corner, but he hasn't, so he will have to burn that immediately onto the Mulsanne straight. But Crowhawk will be out of the hunt as he's deciding to burn a big chunk of the penalty there through the Dunlop chicane. I think that's going to be frowned upon quite a bit by the stewards, as the Yaya is trying to find a way through right now, but it's going from good to bad to worse for Crowhawk as Yaya's trying to poke his way through and can't find his way through right now, and this is giving Krynik Opel everything he needs to hold on for one final lap as Yaya also gets a half-second penalty. They'll have to burn these penalties on this straight here, and that means Slim Jesus will now jump up into P2 and be at the head of this pack. But meanwhile, this pack, whilst it's squabbling and dealing with its penalties, Krynik Opel just needs to get the car home. He just cannot afford to make any mistakes or penalties. If he can bring it home, this will be the recovery of the season, no doubt, as we see that Phil the Vibes in P6 hunting Zenq down. Zenq is 3 seconds up the road. Banzer in P7 right now. He's dropped K2. The gap is 3 seconds to K2, 2.9 to Phil the Vibes ahead, and K2 well ahead of Luco right now, as we hear that the Estonian Peachella has pitted and he's come back out in last place, but he had good fun whilst he was allowed to race as he makes his way up towards the Tetrarouge chicane. But we can see that Krynik, with that 3.8 second gap, it will come down, of course, through each corner, because the Mazda on those worn tyres will be feeling the pressure right now. And you could see Slim Jesus literally ripping 3/10, but he got it so wrong out of the chicane there. And this is the thing, they're pushing so hard on unstable rear setups on these Porsche 962s. They've got so much apex speed, but it's getting on the power. And as soon as they make one little mistake, it's compounded. And you can see Yaya battling to the outside versus Slim Jesus here as they make their way down to the braking zone for the Mulsanne corner, and Yaya goes around the outside feeling that he can be the one to break the Australians around as Crowhawk's into the wall, and that means we've lost our P4 man in the hunt for the race lead. He's not going to lose out on that P4. He's got too much of a gap to Zenq. But there's Zenq behind right now. Zenq almost making the same mistake as the Croatian there, as we see Basler into the gravel, and Phil the Vibes literally parking the car on the corner there, and well, it was in the K2 having to take major evasive action there, and Phil the Vibes clearly contacting the back of Basler's car. But as a result of that, now those two drop in positions, K2 up into P6 as we see Krynik Opel now in the run down towards the Porsche curves, and the guys behind are continuing to battle. The gap has opened up to 4.8 seconds as Slim Jesus has got past Yaya, and we can see behind them Crowhawk picking up another penalty. The gap between him and Zenq coming down. Zenq almost gets it wrong again in the rear of your camera shot, but we can see that Slim Jesus versus Yaya. Yaya goes up the inside of Jesus into the Porsche curves, but as he makes his way through the Porsche curves right now, 5 seconds clear, all he's got to do is bring it home. There's only 2 more chicanes to go. He's literally brought this one out of nowhere after a disastrous race number 1, a gradual recovery in race number 2. He's got 4 more corners, 2 more corners, and the Mazda 787B comes out of the final corner to win race number 3. Krynik Opel crosses the line, and Yaya, whilst he had the pace, wasn't able to get the win in P2, and Jesus in a well-deserved P3. Crowhawk will be kicking himself for that mistake coming out of the Mulsanne corner in P4, and in the end, for the final top 5 position, it will be Zenq Meister, the Polish driver, bringing it home there in P5. K2 after Vibes and Basler coming together, bringing it home in P6. A good effort from the Dutchman, a good result for the evening to conclude on for him. Phil the Vibes in P7, it's going to be Basler in P8, and then it will be Luco in P9. The Welshman there, not having the best of nights, but doing the best he could with the Sauber Mercedes C9. And Vox Bacchus, where it has not been a fantastic evening for the Welsh contingent, and Bacchus there sliding his way across the Ford chicane apex for a track limits penalty, but I think he's already burnt it as he crosses the line in P10. And then it's going to be Golden Dagan there, coming home in P11. And then last but not least, but he had fun, I'm sure of that. He put a lot of fight in it, and you could argue that he was a little bit of a cork in the bottle for a good number of drivers, but the Estonian Peachella crosses the line in P12. Congratulations to all of our drivers, but to our race winner, Krynik Opel from Australia. What a race. What a fantastic race 3 to conclude on for EU Division 1. And here are your race results, subject to any stewards' inquiries. Opel there bringing home the win, 4.5 seconds clear of Yaya, and third going to Slim Users on the bottom step of the podium. Crowhawk just missing out in that P4, and ZenQ rounding off our top 5. The fastest lap being set by Yaya on lap number 4, a 3:19.316. I believe the fastest lap, if not almost the fastest lap we've seen in race pace all evening. But what a fantastic race number 3. And really, with those points tonight, I think that's going to open up the EU Division 1 Championship massively. Of course, we will have a lot of stewarding decisions to get through, but you can be sure that right now, the EU Division 1 Constructors and Drivers Championships are going to be heavily flipped as a result of the races tonight. And well, if there's going to be any stewarding decisions, there's going to be plenty of those to factor in. And if any of those change people's finishing positions with time penalties or that, or even grid place penalties for round number 3, you can imagine that's going to only further twist the yarn in the story. But we now wait for King of the Karts to get underway. But what a fantastic load of racing tonight. Albeit not all of it was clean, but the best parts were clean. And I must admit, ladies and gentlemen, my driver of the day for round number 2 in EU Division 1, well, I mean, I'm going to sing his praises because he didn't give up. He had a disastrous race number 1, a better race number 2, and then just worked it for race number 3. Opel, folks, to me, driver of the day, hands down. To come back like that after what was effectively 4 races in a row of just disaster and things going wrong, to then literally in race 5 and race 6 to be able to have that stamina to bring it back, and also that mental fortitude, as we are going to need to get our camera flipped around. That's something else. There we go. Now we just wait for King of the Karts, which I suspect will probably be 1 lap around here, given the length of the lap. And if anybody is watching and wants to join on the King of the Karts, be sure to have Yaya777 on your friends list, because he is our trackside steward and has been our lobby host for the evening. I should really change the gearbox back to the one with the better acceleration, but given the length of the straights around here, I'm going to keep it wide. We'll eventually get to 6th gear. And we actually lost speed by upshifting there. Oh, goodness me. Put it on auto drive for a bit. Right, we're going to have 7-car King of the Karts. Here we go then, ladies and gentlemen. Let's see what we can do. As we saw H-Boss join there just a little bit too late into the lobby. Oh yeah, I can absolutely floor it now because the because we haven't got as much torque in the first gear. Because we forgot the concept of acceleration with this tune. Sorry, H-Boss. Just missed out a tiny bit, mate. I wonder what the strong toe zone is. I mean, if weak is 2.25, I just hit the rev limiter. Right, 118 is the rev limiter, and there's the boost. Okay, this is going a bit too fast for a go-kart. But fortunately for us, there's no track limits, which means that kart has actually helped us get a bit closer. Yeah, we've got the triple toe now for definite. As we very gradually start to lose speed because we go up a small hill, and then we build all the speed because we're now going down a very small hill. Crikey, this is we see Yaya. I think he had a bit of a moment, but he's been able to get it back together, and he'll be joining back into this battle for the win. You too, H-Boss. Thank you for joining us, mate. We just got to be smart about this. Thank you. It's a pleasure as always. It was not my intention to put Feel the Vibes into the wall there, I must admit. remembering that you can get reset off of the chicanes. I'll take a P2. Finish behind the driver of the night for me. That was King of the Karts, EU Division 1. Oh, it's been a pleasure, and thank you, Lurb, and thank you to everybody who's tuned in this evening. I appreciate that things took a little bit longer to get underway than originally planned, but as we can see, we've had EU Division 1 Season 40 of round number 2. Hope you've enjoyed it, and do come back tomorrow night where Pies 1123 will be bringing you the broadcast of EU Division 2. But until then, it's goodbye from me as part of the GTSRL commentary team, and I'll see you in a week's time for the grand finale of EU Division 1 round number 3. But if you're looking for some racing action before then, feel free to come back on Wednesday when I'll be broadcasting another track day test event and test race event for the Next Gen Racing GT3 GTE Season 2 2021 series. But until then, stay safe, stay well, stay smiling, but most importantly, remember to stay on track. Good night.